Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Joe, it was a weird and wild night in the Rose Bowl. Obviously, kind of a bittersweet time, just kind of ASU's last regularly scheduled trip to Pasadena to face the Bruins. But all that weirdness paid off in a big way.
In hallowed grounds of college football, ASU left the Rose Bowl with a weird, a wild, and unconventional, at times aggravating and frustrating win, but all's well that ends well if you get the dub over a solid UCLA team. And oh, by the way, he might have kind of kicked his head coach to the curb, depending on how the next few weeks pan out. That's obviously a victory in every capacity. It was a gutsy, gritty win for ASU, and one that not a lot of folks saw coming in a year where things have, generally gone as expected with quite a few low points. This is about as high as it gets so far this season.
Yeah, ASU got a 17-7 victory over the Bruins, getting them to 3-7 on the year, down just 2 games left in the season. It's flying by, but obviously that was a very nice boost for Sun Devil fans, and perhaps some news on Monday that we'll dive into in a second, perhaps even eclipse that in terms of what the fans are feeling in terms of the future of Sun Devil athletics as a whole. So obviously a lot to talk about, a lot to break down, and of course a huge matchup coming up this Saturday that we're going to preview with the number 6 Oregon Ducks coming to town with James Crepea of the Oregonian.com. He's going to be coming in and giving us an inside look at those Ducks, who have some playoff hopes, some serious playoff hopes. Offensive lineman Cade Briggs and tight end Jalin Conyers will join us later, talk about their performances on the field and what's ahead. And then Joe, one of the people's champions, as you like to call him, one of our most popular guests. I mean, it might be just Ralph and Jordan Simone is going to be joining us. I mean, this is a guy that is obviously very near and dear to our hearts, to this program. And in light of Monday's news, Joe, it's a name that's back in the spotlight.
Great to hear from him. Great to catch up with him. You're going to love what he has to say. And I know that Sun Devil fans are riding high after that victory at UCLA. If you want to be riding in style, go ahead and get yourself a new ride at Jones Auto Group. You know that Jones Auto has been servicing the state of Arizona and the Sun Devil community for more than 50 years with multiple locations across the state. They're as strong as it gets when it comes to their support of Sun Devil athletics and the ASU community. The NIL topic, that's been a big thing, especially the last few days. They are powerful when it comes to that. They've been helping out Sun Devil student athletes for the last few years in tremendous style. And it's your support of Jones Auto Group that helps them do that. You'll be treated like family. Every member of the Sun Devil community is family to Jones Auto Group. If you have any sort of concerns about purchasing a new vehicle, credit issues, whatever that may be, they will outline the best winning game plan for you. As we always tell you, and this is a very real thing, they can also talk about tax advantages of buying from Jones Auto Group. That can save you some money on that big purchase. You want to be making a purchase for a new vehicle with somebody that you trust. Make it a fellow die-hard Sun Devil. Talk to our guy, Parker Jones, not just the owner and GM, but a third-generation Arizona State alum, just like you, a passionate leader of maroon and gold blood. He is riding high, I'm sure, after that victory over the Bruins. So here's his number. Take it down if you haven't already. Put that in your phone. It's his cell number. He wants to hear from you no matter the time of day. Well, maybe not late at night. I don't want to put him in that spot. 602-881-8998. Again, 602-881-8998 for Parker Jones. Anytime you got questions about purchasing a new vehicle, hit him up. You can check out their online inventory of new and used vehicles at jonesautocenters.com. Jones Auto Group, Arizona's best since 1970.
All right, so it's time to look at some of the news headlines. We'll ramp up from maybe smallest to probably the big headliner that you're all eagerly awaiting to hear about. The Oregon kickoff time, which as we were last joining you, was a 6-day hold. As you probably know by now, 2 p.m. TV on Fox. And now, of course, the Territorial Cup matchup next Saturday when U of A is coming to town. The Devils looking to get that precious cup back to reside in Tempe. Well, I wish I could tell you a time, but it's also been a dreaded 6-day hold.
Well, that Oregon kickoff time, that's solid. That's real solid when it comes to, getting into the mid-November time of thing. Should be a beautiful day out there. I love that environment in November.
Only drawback is no Pac-12 After Dark Magic, which helped ASU in 2019.
That is true. So maybe if they draw it out into, multiple overtime, if you lengthen the game, maybe you can get there at the very end. And speaking of that general topic, I mean, I guess anything's possible, but it seems like it'd be a surprise if the Territorial Cup game is on the Pac-12 network. Right.
It's not unprecedented. Didn't the 2018 game, wasn't that the 19
so.
point?
I figure,
comeback?
I mean, you got a team that is nationally ranked and probably will continue to be. What I'm saying is that, what do you think the odds are that ASU has played its last game of American football on the Pac-12 network?
Oh God, we can only hope. We can only be so fortunate.
Exactly. But, of course, it'll be a home game no matter what. So folks need to fill the stands of Mountain America Stadium for both these last two games.
All right. So, and Deshaun Mallory, who we'll talk about a little bit more in our game recap, absolutely was monstrous in the win over UCLA. He was recognized as the Pac-12 Defensive Lineman of the Week. 9 tackles, 6 solo. Not bad for a defensive tackle. Half sack. The number of quarterback pressures. I believe PFF ranked him as having the most stops of an interior D lineman in the country, as well as 2 key pass deflections, 2 passes batted down. The dude has been an absolutely essential pickup and key part of the Sun Devil defense all year long.
He just reminded me in that game, it just looked like Will Sutton out there running around. I mean, didn't necessarily get like the TFLs and the sacks like Will did in those All-America seasons that he had, but he was just wreaking havoc that just reminded me of Will Sutton. And for my money, Will Sutton's one of the all-time greatest defensive linemen, of course, ever to play for Arizona State University. So that was just an incredible performance by Mallory, a pivotal performer in that close victory. Much deserved accolades. I mean, this is a guy that, of course, came over from Michigan State. There were some concerns whether he would even make it to campus, whether he'd be in the program. Some, folks waiting bated breath just to figure out if he's ever going to get here. And he's had a solid season, capped off by a tremendous outing against UCLA.
Oh yeah, and a great young man as well. Every time I talk to him, just an absolutely, just kind of bastion of positivity. Great person to talk to. And Kenny Dillingham even like shouted him out when because Mallory was such a key part of the 3 fourth down stops that ASU had, just stuffing the Bruins in critical fourth down short yardage situations. And he was asked, what were the keys to those stops? And he's like, 1, good scheme. 2, Deshaun Mallory. And yeah, so he absolutely was eaten in the Rose Bowl on Saturday night. So great to see his success. He's a guy that, went from a fringe player contributor at Michigan State to a guy, as Kenny Dillingham said, probably going to be drafted in this spring. So great news there. Some also good news, Joe, on the injury front at practice today, and this is stuff that we are allowed to report for their policy. Jaden Rashada, the quarterback who, of course, started this season as the ASU starter for the first 2 games, the true freshman, took some team reps for the first time, I believe, since the injury that knocked him out for the last 8 games. Now, of course, he is able to play in these final 2 games and still maintain his red shirt. That's the priority number 1. So he was taking second team quarterback reps earlier today. So good to see Jaden getting around.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful if he's at a healthy enough point to get back on the field in a significant capacity. We will see, because, I mean, you have to absolutely love and be tremendously proud of the gutsy performance by Trenton Bourguet, not just last week, but this season as a whole. It's pretty apparent that he's not 100%. I mean, that's why you got to be as creative as they have been at that position. So if you can add a little bit more to the arsenal under center at quarterback for ASU, that can only help you when you have a high-powered offense that you're going to be facing this week, and then a very good defense in the final game. Every little bit that you can throw out there helps.
And so some other good news in terms of local guys that are making their way back. Running back to Carlos Brooks was taking part in team sessions and Tuesday's practice as well. His presence has been kind of sorely missed in that backfield. Having such whenever he's been in there, he's just been making his mark and being able to run hard and pick up those tough yards. Also doing some of the dirty work in terms of blocking. And defensive tackle Anthony Cooper, another local guy who's been out of action for much of this season. Unfortunately, it looks like he was out there doing some teamwork as well. So he'd be a nice boost for that defensive line, and getting him in his final season to wrap up his season against the Wildcats in this kind of state title game would be pretty great to see.
Yeah, that would be huge for both of those guys. I mean, whether it's for one or both of these final games, when you have a marquee opponent like Oregon, you want to be out there on the field. And obviously, you need those talented players. These are not just bodies that are playing. Carlos Brooks had that incredible game against Washington State. Anthony Cooper's been solid pretty much his whole career at ASU. And then that final one, you need everybody to suit up, especially if they're from the state of Arizona, which those 2 guys are. You need everyone out there against those visiting Wildcats.
Now, speaking of local players, one who does not appear that he will be in that maroon and gold is a 2024 4-star athlete prospect, Dylan Tapley, who had committed to ASU. I believe was the first local commit to Kenny Dillingham once he took over. He announced his decommitment recently. So that's a kind of one of the one of the couple 4-star prospects in ASU's 2024 class. Of course, the early signing period does open in mid-December, so that's coming up pretty soon, and it's a notable loss for the Sun Devil 2024 class.
Yep, one of the few down spots of the last week or so in Sun Devil football. So that's one where you just got to move onward and fill the spot.
And so head over to the huddle on devilsdigest.com if you would like some additional details on that front. And of course, now probably to the biggest news maybe of the season, of the year. I know for maybe a couple of years in terms of Sun Devil fans. On Monday morning, athletic director Ray Anderson announced his resignation effective immediately.
And man, what a surprise that was, at least with the timing. It was something that most, if not all, Sun Devil fans viewed as a foregone conclusion. There are a lot of folks out there that just seem to be waiting, like they had like a advent calendar marking down the days, but they didn't know when that was going to happen. You've had a lot of people be very vocal on social media, message boards, that sort of thing, about withholding support, whether that's NIL or other contributions, whether that's season tickets, whatever it may be. You had some folks that drew a line in the sand, and that's their right to do. But that period of time, that era, that regime is now conclusively over. And so it's about looking toward the future in Sun Devil athletics, starting, of course, with the person at the top, whomever the next athletic director will be.
Now, we did do an emergency episode, Joe and I did, with Hode Rubino, the publisher of devilsdigest.com, yesterday, right after the news broke. So encourage you folks, we go really in depth and kind of, all the angles there in terms of kind of what led up to the decision, what it kind of means for the near term, but also looking forward to the future. It's about a 25-minute episode. You can find, of course, everywhere you're getting this show. So encourage all you folks to head over there. Listen to that episode, because that's where we'll go really in depth. We don't have to maybe double dip here. We'll keep that the Ray Anderson talk to that special emergency episode.
So there are a lot of Sun Devils that are fired up about Arizona State, and you want some passion. We're about to talk to a guy with some passion, but to share that passion, get on down to Cactus Sports. You got to share that with the world. Get some new Sun Devil gear. If you're excited about these changes, the new era upcoming for Arizona State athletics, show that off. Show that Sun Devil pride with gear from Cactus Sports. Of course, their store location is at 514 South Mill Avenue in Tempe. You can put together the perfect Sun Devil fit from head to toe in just one stop with the absolute best ASU merchandise around at Cactus Sports. And at Cactus Sports, they are as passionate about making sure you look your Sun Devil best as they are about supporting the maroon and gold on game day. If you can't make it to that Mill Avenue location, or maybe if you're starting to do some holiday shopping for yourself or others, get on down to cactussports.com. Put together your ultimate Sun Devil gear wish list. And you can stock up, put together a big order. They offer free domestic ground shipping on orders over $75. So follow them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cactus Sports AZ. Cactus Sports, ASU alumni owned since 1992. Think local, buy local, be local. All right, Sun Devil fans, here we go. I'm going to say right now, the most eagerly anticipated guest that we've ever had, the glorious, triumphant return of our guy, our brother, one of the all-time greats on and off the field for Sun Devil football. You knew him as an all-timer at safety for the Devils back in 2014, 2015. You knew him when he was on the sidelines. You love him through the thick and thin. Welcome back, our guy, our brother, to talk about some big news. Jordan Simone, I love saying those words. My brother, welcome aboard.
It's good to be back. I'm sure Brad has what number guest appearances is for me ready to roll.
Oh man, let's go with 13.
Immediately called out.
Oh geez, it's already falling apart.
I mean, that hurts, but we're gonna move past it. No, it's great to be back on here with you guys. Man, I just mentioned before we started, it's been 2 years since I was let go of the Sun Devil broadcast team, which was a bummer, of course. I still bleed maroon and gold, and I'd heard the person that made the call and fired me is the one that was let go as our athletic director yesterday. So crazy news. And something I've always said is that I always had respect for Ray. He was always so good to me. When I was a player, and even when I was calling games for ASU, I was I looked at him as a mentor. I would go to his office, I would meet with him. He gave me great advice. And so I think that my comments regarding the team and how the coaches, or that's probably what threw him off, was, that we did have a good relationship, um, and that, he was caught off guard. And so I think ultimately that was probably the reason. I just wish that, maybe he would have called me first, or called me into his office and, look me in the eye and see what my intent was with those comments. My intent was not to destroy the program, um, and be overly negative, which it kind of came off as. It was more of a frustration. And now you see that team that I was so frustrated about, and you got Jaden Daniels potentially about to win the Heisman. You got Johnny Wilson playing receiver at undefeated Florida State. You got Ricky Pearsall starting receiver for an SEC football team in Florida. You got a starting running back, or a running back sharing time at Ohio State, and Chip Trainum. And that was always my argument was, God, they had so much talent. How come we're not seeing it on the field? And now you are for a lot of those kids, because they're being coached hard. And I couldn't be happier, especially for a kid like Jaden, who's so talented. And you need coaches to pull the talent and the discipline out of you, um, with several different things. But all that to say, man, I haven't talked football in a while. It's been a couple years. But it's good to be back with you guys, and looking forward to discussing things with you again. It's been a while.
Coming hot out of the gates. Well, we're going to put the football talk on pause for a second, man. We want to know what's going on with you. Tell us about life, brother. Like you said, it's been far, far too long. How's the
Yeah,
family? How's everything going, brother?
man, family is so good. I have a 14-month-old daughter now who's just crushing. She might play safety at ASU one day. She's just nuts, like her dad. But no, we're all doing good, and we've been watching the Devils a couple games myself. Um, Definitely miss being back on the sideline, and being involved with the program. But like everybody always says, like give Simone his job back, give Simone his job back. And to be truthful with you guys, I don't know that I would want it back. I'm loving being a dad. I'm loving having free weekends, and I'm a commercial insurance broker, and I love my job. Is not fun as that sounds for people that don't know insurance. I really truly love it, and I love the crew that I work with. So I don't know that I would step back into that position to lose weekends again away from the family during football season, because it's a big time commitment. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, life couldn't be better. So blessed. And I haven't really missed talking football either a ton, which is surprising, because I always felt like I had a doctorate in football, and why wouldn't I use it? Um, because it's what I've known my whole life. Um, but for me to step back in, it'd have to be the perfect opportunity and the perfect timing with my family. Um, because right now things are just too damn good.
Well, so you obviously mentioned kind of right off the top that, kind of going back to kind of the end of your tenure as the sideline reporter, but obviously the big news coming just yesterday when Ray's resignation came down. There's going to be a change in leadership for Sun Devil Athletics. Those words kind of first hit your ear, what were those initial thoughts like?
Oh man. Obviously excited for the future of the university and the athletic department. I think it was long overdue in most everyone's eyes. Um, I do want to reiterate that, like, I would still love to sit down with Ray and just like have a conversation with him. I honestly think it's been so long too that it doesn't even matter, like my issues with him. He has so many more issues, that he had to worry about. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just the step that we've all been wanting in the right direction. Like, I personally know so many boosters that did not want to give to the program until they saw, him, be replaced. Um, and I think it's exciting for the future. I think that people are going to re-engage the football program. I think it's great for Kenny, and great for them on the NIL side of things to get boosters, back around the program. Um, I'm excited to get around the program selfishly again, to go to practice and not feel like I have to, worry about looking over my shoulder or anything like that. And not that I, necessarily did. It was more of just a respect thing. I didn't want to step on Ray's toes and make him uncomfortable. And I always knew that, this day would come and I would be, I'd go back to ASU and I'd be an alumni, football player again, and that Ray would move on to do something else. And here we are. And I wish Ray the best of luck. And, if I don't know if he's retiring or what he's planning on doing, but he really was such a nice guy to me, and his wife is incredibly nice as well. So um, yeah, just it's an exciting time for ASU, and they weird timing for him to announce it, but maybe get the ASU fans off a road win. I don't know. But just, yeah, excited for the future of the program, and to move forward. Put everything in the past. I have no idea who they're going to hire. I actually would love to hear your guys' opinion on that, because
I
I've
mean, are
asked a
you
bunch
open to
of
the job?
buddies. Am I up for the job?
People's
Yeah.
champion.
Yeah, you would have the people's support.
Yeah. I I would have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, other than just show up to all the sporting events, and raise money. I mean, I would have no idea.
That's about the,
You
the
know,
biggest box to check is just you
Yeah.
get those checkbooks
Just
open.
just be a good person. Talk to all the coaches. If somebody's doing bad, fire them, obviously,
there you go.
and raise money. NIL.
So, in addition to your reactions, everything you just outlined, what conversations have you had? I know it's been a short span, just barely over 24 hours, with maybe former teammates of yours or others that have been around the program. What
Yeah.
reactions have you had those conversations about with?
Man, I've talked to a bunch of my buddies I played with, and I think everybody's just ready for a breath of fresh air. I think everybody's ready to move forward, kind of like I said, and find the next person, somebody that's going to really lean into to what Kenny's doing and activating the Valley, and getting some money behind them in the NIL so that they can be as competitive as possible, and not just in football, right? In basketball, and the softball and soccer, and you name it. We got to have support behind these student athletes and behind the coaches to be able to recruit. In today's landscape of college football, you have to have that NIL deal to be able to compete in the recruiting side of things, especially as we transition to the Big 12. Maybe you're looking less in California for players, and you're looking in Arizona, and now you're battling in Texas. So got to have money, got to have the resources. So whoever you bring in as your AD has got to be somebody that understands that, right? Maybe not somebody that's as old school, the way that they approach things. So I think everybody's just excited to get back on the right track.
So, a moment ago, you mentioned what your experience was like with Ray Anderson in a professional capacity that you had at ASU a couple years ago. But of course, he was hired right after your redshirt season, so he was the AD or 2 seasons on the field for ASU. So, strictly as a student athlete during your time at ASU, what was that experience like with him?
We didn't really have a ton of interaction with the AD with Ray when I was playing. As a student athlete, you're just so focused on playing that like all this stuff in the background is just noise, for the most part. So as a student athlete, I was never like, "Ooh, let me go meet the AD." Let me shake his hand, let me say hello. Um, and him being new, I think is tough because he's meeting 500 people, um, you know, across from the athletic department to the different players. So I think he was just trying to get his wits about him. But there was like a feeling that, like him and Coach Graham didn't really vibe or get along, and I think that's pretty well documented in
Mhm.
public now
Yeah.
with Ray firing him and everything. But yeah, there was always some weird tension, I guess, there. And then me being one of Coach Graham's guys, I don't know if there was some tension with him behind that, but I never felt like that. I always felt like he was a good guy until he decided to ripcord me on out of the broadcast.
So obviously, when you look back, obviously starting your time when you're a student athlete, and then for the program that you bleed maroon and gold, and then for a time it was your boss, and in terms of just overseeing the broadcasting capacity. When you look at the entirety of his near decade tenure of leading the athletics at your alma mater, how do you kind of evaluate the whole body of work under Ray Anderson?
Gosh, that's such a loaded question. I mean, there are some hires that I like, if I'm being honest. Like I like the Willie Bloomquist hire for baseball. And I'm not going to pretend to be, like the biggest guy with stats when it comes to baseball and basketball. I love the Bobby Hurley hire as well. Um, and like you look at their records and maybe you're like, we could do better, but I don't know that we could right now. And Bobby continues to recruit well, and then like just getting people that are passionate and care. um and then like women's basketball had a run, and I don't know that he hired Charlie. But like I don't know, like the two revenue generating sports obviously are where everybody looks, and football being one. The Herm deal is what really crushed Ray's like legacy, I think, at ASU. Firing Todd the way that he did, and then hiring his buddy that turned out to not to be just like a catastrophic meltdown. But they recruited well, and now you see a guy like Antonio Pierce as the head coach for the Raiders. So I think like you can kind of see like they almost did it. Like they almost were able to get the plan. I think the plan was for Antonio to take over when Herm was done, and he went his separate way, and he's having success, but it didn't work out, which is the problem. It's like that's where things went south for Ray. And then like you got a bunch of different allegations and different stories that you hear that somebody covering up something and just maybe not being the most ethical. And again, like that's all stuff I've heard. I'm not for sure, but just yeah, like I said in the beginning, I think it was time for a move. I think it was a little overdue with the way the football program was performing under Herm, and just the way that he took care of Herm on the way out kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So um, look at you guys, already got me talking on here again. At least they can't fire me from anything.
There you go. Full autonomy here. All right. So a moment ago, you were saying you wanted our input on the AD candidates,
Yeah.
but we're doing the interview here, so we're going to ask some questions first. So
Yeah.
whether it's a name or names, which may not be the case, and that's fine. If you don't have names,
Yeah.
what would be some qualities? What are the top few qualities that this next AD absolutely has to have for ASU?
Yeah, I think you got to have somebody that cares about, the university, that wants to see ASU be successful and not use it as a stepping stone to get to somewhere else. I think you have to have somebody that can raise money, that understands football and coaching, and kind of what it takes to have a successful football team, especially in today's landscape with NIL. So somebody that can raise a lot of money, connected to the alumni, you know, like there, I've heard Rocky Harris's name thrown around,
Yep.
who used to be at ASU when I was there. And it's funny, as a player, you don't really get to know these guys as professionals. You get to know them as just like a face in the building. And that's how it kind of was for myself and other the players with Rocky. I'd always see Rocky. Hey, Rocky, how's it going? On a away game. What's up? What's going on? Small talk. But no, I don't know him as a professional. I do. Everybody, speak very highly of him. And like, uh, just like you can tell when somebody's a really nice person, but then to hear people that work with him speak so highly of him, I think says a lot. And then another guy who I've talked to a ton, and this is going to be a hot topic, but Todd Graham. Todd Graham, I think, has some serious interest in the athletic director position at ASU. And like I'll just throw that out there. I know he's interested in it, and you mean talk about a guy that could raise some serious money for football, and maybe it's a maybe it's a pipe dream, but I don't know. I think he wants that job, and I think he would be able to support the football program pretty well. It's adapted to everything else. It's not just a multifaceted job, right? You got all the women's sports, and then there's a lot that goes into it, obviously. But that's why I've asked other people. I'm like, who are some names you guys are hearing? Because nobody has given me anything. Even people like that are tied in. I don't think they know. So how do you even search for an AD?
That's a heck of a question. That's why we're sitting here, and the people getting the big bucks are the ones pulling the strings, making the decisions. So
I
if
know.
we're looking at ASU athletics from a larger scale, even beyond the athletic director, now that we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, we're not there yet, but
Mhm.
light at the end of the tunnel of this 2 to 3 year nightmare that's been going on. What will it take, not only from Sun Devil Athletics, not only from the administration, but also the ASU community as a whole, not just to get out of this hole, but to propel things back to, where they were when you were playing here or even beyond?
Man, I think that they're on the right track with Kenny. I mean, I've uh I've had an opportunity to watch, a lot of the games this year, and they're competitive. Like they're competitive in his first year. They've got a ton of missing pieces on the team, but Kenny's finding a way to inspire them in a year where they have no opportunity to go to a bowl game. They're I mean, they're competing with some of the best teams in the Pac-12. Now, the Utah loss was tough. And I think Utah is built to crush teams that are trying to find their identity. But like you look at them going on the road to play UW, that's like a serious, serious road battle. Up in the Northwest, it's raining, it's colder, and they take it to a UW team that wasn't expecting them to do anything. Um, and you just look across their season. My dad, who also played at ASU, is always calling me, "Man, they should have won this game. They should have won this game. They should have won this game." And I hate when people say "shoulda," because that's football. Like the ball bounces, certain ways, and it's a game of inches, and that's like in 2014 Utah misses a field goal in overtime and we make a field goal and we win. Like that's how it is. That's football. Like sometimes you should have won but you didn't. Um, so I think they're on the right track with Kenny, and I think the fans need to buy in, and I think we need to be patient still. I still think we need to give our money, to give our time, to the program. And there's NIL collectives that anybody can get involved in, but just give Kenny time. And like I love what they've done defensively. They're gonna have, they'll have their offensive weapons, and we just need to give them the tools to go recruit, and help them be successful.
Now, do you feel that this change in leadership for Sun Devil Athletics kind of opens the door to get you and others back in the program, or under Ray the last couple of years and kind of the cloud that's been hanging over the program? Did you guys feel that maybe perhaps that door wasn't as wide open as it should have been?
Um, I think for former players, most everybody has felt like they could come back. Um, I just obviously have I had a different feeling about it the last couple years. I just didn't want to make it like me versus Ray. So I kind of stepped back big time. Um, but yeah, I'll for sure get back involved. I'll go to the games. I'll go on the sidelines, um, and and hopefully welcomed back, like nothing ever happened. But that'll remain to be seen. And like I've always said since I got fired, like my love for ASU will never change. It's just I'm gonna take a little breather here. I'm gonna step back and realize that I wasn't perfect in this situation either. Um, Regroup, focus on family, focus on my career, um, because I was not getting paid very much to do ASU football games. I had to have a career. So I've really leaned into that and love where I'm at. But yeah, for sure get involved, and like DJ's Foster's working, in the student athlete facility building or the football building. I know a ton of those coaches up there. So yeah, I'll for sure be around, and I have been around a little bit. I just I didn't want to overdo it.
And obviously, kind of when you came on the show and shared their honest feelings and assessment of the program, it was kind of near the end of a season that was falling short of expectations, and seeing the program that you bled for go through these two really kind of difficult seasons. The investigation, of course, is still ongoing. What's it been like, just kind of watching from afar of just the program that you love so much, just going through such difficult times?
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks, right? I mean, it sucks for the fans, sucks for us former players. And I think that's kind of what I could see, when all this is going down is like, the players, I mean, they undid everything that Todd Graham did, which was he brought discipline and like toughness and high character. And not that, like the players didn't have that, but like it seemed like the discipline issues started to come back with penalties and turnovers. And like that is hard to recorrect, like after it happens. So, knew whoever was going to take the job had an uphill battle. And so like ASU has surprised me this year though. They've been competitive in games. The players play hard. Um, Kenny's called some great games. Back as the OC, our defenses looked good. If you give them some recruits and get some guys to buy in to what they're doing, and they build the culture and the program, there's no question that they'll be back. I believe in what Kenny's doing, and I'm excited for the future. I'm out here trying to activate the Valley like everybody else, so I'm fired up for what they got going. Um, it's just going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. These things. You even look at Colorado. They had like a hot start, but what are they doing now? They haven't won games that they wish they would have, and that's football, man. That's what it is. Things rarely happen overnight, so you just got to buy into Kenny and continue to believe in him and let him build the program.
Speaking of Kenny, obviously, he's done a pretty good job of navigating a very difficult year of just things kind of, going on with the injury bug kind of sweeping across the program, things off the field as well, the administration. How do you think that Kenny's kind of done, in year one, given all these circumstances and maybe some of the things, when you look back at your time when he was, and during his initial run at
Mhm.
ASU, some of the things that you might have saw there that maybe have kind of translated and blossomed over the years into the head coach?
Yeah, as a GA, I just remember him being hungry and like so much energy. He had so much energy, which you have to have as a GA, and um, I mean that's transpired into like getting an opportunity, and what he's done with those opportunities has been huge. So like we just gotta keep giving him time to build the program. And when he got hired, I said, we need to give him 5 years, legitimately 5 years to work on this program, because he's got an uphill battle, with the way things were left. But I really think he's done a great job of hiring coaches that have ties to Arizona, coaches that can recruit. But you still got to be able to coach those players and develop those players, which I believe he can do. So I think he's got good people around him, and I think he cares about ASU. So I'm just excited to continue watching him. I'm gonna try to hang with him a little bit in the off season now that when things calm down a little bit, and um, just offer any support I can. And he's done a great job with booster relations too. Getting involved, getting guys involved that weren't involved when Herm was there, and um, guys that will be excited about the transition now here with Ray. So I'm excited to see who they get to come be the AD at ASU, and it's obviously a big opportunity for somebody. I got to imagine Rocky will be on that list, just with his ties, and I've even heard that Rocky's like potential for taking over at the Olympics or something like that. So I mean that might even be a bigger opportunity than ASU.
So obviously you mentioned that when you're watching these games so far this year that the Devils, no matter who's out there, are showing tremendous and impressive amount of fight, always battling each and every game. What other elements about this team really kind of jumped out to you and impressed?
Um, Man, I just think their ability to get players that weren't on the team a year ago and get them into the mindset of playing hard with everything that they've had going on. All these transfers. Like a guy like Scatabo is a great example. Like, battled some injuries, but just comes in and plays hard and does what they ask him to do. Um, and like Jalin Conyers hasn't had, I'm sure, the year that he's wanted to, but I haven't seen him pout. I haven't seen him complain. I've seen interviews of him still smiling and talking and excited. So that's a reflection of the coaching staff, and those guys that are talking to him every day. So I think the team's just been resilient. I think they've been resilient and battled through adversity, which will help them so much in their lives post football. That's something that I'm truly grateful for. Coach Graham was he just taught us so much about how to deal with adversity, um, and things that matter after football, which is important. They're developing young men. Those guys at ASU, those players, they think that they're men now. They have no idea what stepping out into the real world is like, and being a dad and being a husband, and Like that's real life. So they're college kids, right? They're enjoying it, but you got to give those guys tools to take away from football and use for real life. And I think Kenny will do a good job of doing that.
So defensive coordinator Brian Ward took the Jordan Simone life path as he came from Washington State to Arizona State, of course. So what are your thoughts on the job that he has done this season as DC for the Devils?
I'm happy that we got him again. Like how many times are we used to like having like, okay, we got a good coach, we got a good coach. Okay, he took a job at Oklahoma State. You're like, ah, dang, like can we just keep a staff here for a little bit? And it sounds like Kenny's going to be able to do that. So I'm just excited that we got him. And again, like you look at the tools that he's had, on defense, he's done a great job. Keeping games competitive, for the most part. Take away the Utah game, and I'd love to see the stats. How much they've lost games by, possession, maybe two. So it's funny, like being out of the media, you're not talking about it, you're not reading about it as much, and so I only have face value, which is really the games, and they just look like they play hard, they play tough, and I like what he's done, and I'm glad that we got him signed up for a couple more years here.
So last question before we get you out of here. Let's look to the future. Give us your thoughts on going to the Big 12. I mean, you've lived, grew up in, played in two different areas very significant to the Pac-12 in the state of Washington, the Phoenix area. What are your thoughts on the future conference home for Arizona State?
Well, it's such a bummer that the Pac-12 is gone, and obviously this is old news. But having not been in the media, I haven't talked about it, publicly. So I do want to say I am so bummed that the Pac-12 deal happened, and I wish that ESPN would have just bought them and kept the Pac-12 together. It's unfortunate that it didn't happen. I think it'll be studied as some of the worst leadership, in history of college football. The way that all unfolded, it's a bummer. Um, just there's so much history, obviously, but it is exciting that I have family. My brother played at Washington State. And he's really bummed because they don't know what they're gonna do, and so I'm at least happy and grateful that ASU is going to be in the Big 12, so that we're not just sitting there roaming around. Um, It'll be exciting. I think some new places to travel to, some new rivalries to be had. Obviously we've got Utah and Colorado and U of A with us, which is nice. Keep those schools together. But man, I'll miss the no more Jail Mary games. You don't got USC, ASU. You don't got Washington State coming down to the heat. And us usually having our way with them. So definitely going to be tough with no Pac-12 football. And talk about a terrible year to transition. I mean, everybody's good. We've got Heisman candidates all over the Pac-12. I mean, the Big Ten's just chomping at the bit. They're like, oh yeah, we get two Heisman candidates. I mean, they get Oregon, UW, UCLA, and USC. They hit the jackpot with that one. And then the TV deals for those universities are just so much bigger. Made a ton of sense. So, like I said, I'm just glad that ASU got into the Big 12, and then, it'll be a pretty good little basketball conference, I think, for ASU to be in as well. But I think ASU will be successful. I mean, I think there's the West Coast brand of football. I think transitions well to play in that conference, and I think a lot of them try to do that. So it'll be interesting. It'll be sad, no more classic rivalries, but there'll be some new fun trips for ASU fans and alumni that are all in Texas and across the Big 12. So excited for that.
Well, even though that's sad, my sadness is now gone since you have finally come back to talk with us here. Jordan Simone, an all-time great, my brother. Miss you like crazy. Glad to hear everything's going great. We got to get you sitting in this chair before long.
I mean,
getting these sweet digs in person with us.
It looks like you guys are in Joe Rogan's podcast studio over there. It looks official.
So we got to get you back, my man. Well, all the best. Everybody's fired up that you're back. Truly appreciate you, my brother, as always.
Well, of course, and I appreciate you guys having me. And I'm looking at that studio you guys got, and it's a testament to the years of hard work you've put into this podcast, and fired up for you guys. And I know all the listeners and viewers are as well. You guys have deserved that. So keep going, and I'll see you guys on the other side.
Jordan Simone, until next time. Last Saturday's win was a delicious victory that left smiles on all the faces of Sun Devil fans. And if you want that same sort of food eating experience, I highly recommend you get on down to the Spaghetti Shack, which you certainly should know by now is not just Sun Devil owned, but owned and operated by former Sparky the Sun Devil. They've got 3 locations, one up in the cool temperatures of Pine Top. Although, you know what? The Tempe temperatures are not so bad right now, so I might have to change that for future reference. But whether you're in Pine Top or either of the 2 Tempe locations, hit up Spaghetti Shack. Now, that ASU Tempe location's located just about a mile from Mountain America Stadium. They're open from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. Be sure to check out their new menu. We've been talking about it for a few weeks now. A lot of different options. You kind of mix and match what you want to do with your noodles and your sauces and your proteins. It's a different day at Spaghetti Shack, just like it's a different day in Sun Devil Athletics after the announcement this Monday. So get on down to Spaghetti Shack. And like we tell you all the time, catering is also available, and they are strongly involved in the Sun Devil and Tempe communities like all our sponsors do. Not just good products and services, great people, great contributors to society that we connect ourselves to with these incredible sponsors. So next time you're in Tempe looking for some great grub, check that ASU location out, 922 East Apache Boulevard in Tempe. That's 922 East Apache Boulevard. You can find them on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Spaghetti Shack, and on Twitter at spaghetti_shack. Check out their menu, hours, locations, and more online at thespaghettishack.com. The Spaghetti Shack, takeout for the pasta-loving people.
All right, Joe, it's time to dive back into last Saturday's weird and improbable 17-7 win over UCLA. And I think our buddy Ralph had like the best like summation. He had that scene from Apollo 13 where it just the scientists and folks at ground control just throw a bunch of random parts on a table and said, we got to figure it out. We got to make it work. And ASU did. And just like kind of any solution, they kind of went to the internet and to Google. So after the game, Kenny was asked about the very unusual swinging gate formation that ASU, I believe, used 18 times amongst their 69 plays against UCLA. And he said that Marvin Lewis, that he came up to him and the preparation, said that he remembered that back when he was facing Jim Fossil, when Fossil was at Utah in the 70s, used a swinging gate formation that had some pass plays. So they went to Google, then they looked up some YouTube videos on Tuesday evening, and lo and behold, on Saturday, they used it to great effect to beat offensive innovator Chip Kelly in his home stadium.
Yeah, whether it's YouTube or Google, I don't know if you want to keep an eye on my search history, but you know what? Those guys, they've got some masterful things. You know what I'm saying? That was one of those times where it was just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, it worked. All right, that's cool. I like it. You've got 3 different guys who threw the ball. Jalin Conyers had a combined 8 pass and rush attempts, but only 1 catch. I mean, it was just bizarro world on the football field, but in the end it worked. And there were, again, like a ton of plays of you're launching a pass from the running back deep in your own end zone, or you're launching with the tight end, but they get a pass interference at a crucial time. You have like what felt like 7 false starts in a row on the offensive line, but it cut a lot of time off the clock. It was one of the most maddening ways to watch and experience, and in some cases enjoy a football game. But again, the end justifies the means. The end justifies the really weird with that 17-7 victory for the Devils.
Yeah, so let's start with this offense, and of course, using that swinging gate, and Jalin Conyers, yes, did get the technical start at quarterback, making the 4th different starting quarterback. Believed to be the first time in program history they've had 4 different guys start at quarterback in a single season. There's been a number of 3, but never with 4 until this weird and wild season. And yeah, he as you'll hear from him in a little bit later on. He says he's 2 for 2 officially, but he had 2 PI penalties that he drew on his passes, so he contends he's 4 for 4. But they were doing whatever it took to win, and it was weird, wild, and ugly. But it's just, I think, really kind of speaks to the approach of the staff, that they're not necessarily beholden to a scheme or kind of stubborn, as we've seen some coaches, coming through Tempe that are just trying to fit maybe a square peg in a round hole in terms of their offensive philosophies and their systems. Kenny and staff are really just doing anything and whatever it takes to win and put their players now in the best position for victory. And when you have a decimated offensive line with injuries. And as in Kenny's words, you facing fire-breathing dragons with that UCLA pass rush. What do? You put your offensive line way out wide on the field in the formation and get weird and wild, and it worked. I mean, it wasn't great. ASU had under 300 yards and under 4 yards per play. Not great numbers, but you got the win, and it had to be done. And again, on that night against UCLA, it seemed to work. It wasn't pretty, but there's no such thing as an ugly win.
I mean, with a team being 2-7 entering this game, obviously no chance at a postseason game. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of heartbreak through the season of close losses. This could be a 500 team or better with just a few plays went the Devils' direction. To see the grittiness, to see the buy-in. You've got a guy like Jalin Conyers who statistically has had maybe half the season that we expected him to have, right? I mean, that would be a really easy case for a student athlete to get frustrated with things and not want to take on a new role that's not really going to help his draft stock. Or, to have a guy like Cam Scadaboo who's just doing every single thing that's being asked of him. You have a Trenton Bourguet who's battling through, certainly not 100%, but just being a warrior out there like he always is. For them to do those things, to buy into the team mentality again in the it's one thing if you're on the fringe of a division title or a conference title, or if you're in a playoff race, yeah, that's easy to get folks to buy in because you're about to do something very, very special. At the end of the day, people look at this from the 30,000 foot view and say this team's 3-7. They might go 3-9 or maybe something a little bit better. It's not something that's going to light up the record books or be remembered as the greatest season of all time. And in many capacities, it could be one of the poor ones, but that doesn't matter when you have these competitors that want to get wins. They want to either go out on a high note. They want to win in the Rose Bowl for the final time ever for ASU. So that was something that really stood out to me, is that you have these guys that are willing to do whatever it takes for the team, even though this season, whether it's from an individual or collective perspective, hasn't gone the way that anyone would really like. To still have that attitude this late in the season, I think, is a very big deal.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you'll hear Jalin Conyers talk about, because he was asked about just kind of the season was and his maturation, kind of almost the in-season maturation, because you go back a couple weeks. That Colorado game when he was ill, amongst a couple other players that were under the weather, and he sent that tweet after the game after Kenny mentioned that he wasn't available due to the illness, and he said he was right. So there were some times or some weeks where he was in the doghouse, and we saw him kind of buried on the depth chart, where Bryce Pierre is getting the start and guys that are playing ahead of him. And this is a guy that had all conference, if not all American aspirations coming into the year, but the last few weeks you've seen Jalin Conyers kind of, really kind of buy in, dig down deep. He mentioned today that, going and being named to the PFF team of the week from the Utah week, a game that he did not have a single pass or catch a single pass, but he was recognized for his blocking, was one of the more prouder achievements that he's had. So that just really kind of shows that this is a team that is really bought into whatever it takes. And, I think also this game, for all the offensive ugliness and kind of, the issues that you had and kind of throwing this game plan together, as you might expect, was just an absolute beauty of a drive. 14 plays, 99 yards that ate up 7 minutes and 11 seconds that ended with of course, a running back throwing a touchdown pass. But Cam Scadaboo with a absolute dart to Elijah Badger. But Joe, that to me, or that sequence just kind of epitomized his team is as banged up as they are with the offensive line. The quarterback in Bourguet not being 100%, and capped it off with the running back touchdown pass. Not just kind of some gimmick, but that was a legitimate laser. Just kind of was I think maybe one of the best moments, maybe not just this year, but of the last couple of years.
Yeah, got to give Badger a lot of credit, not just for that play, not just for that drive, but the game as a whole. 12 catches, 116 yards, and of course that touchdown catch. And like you said, I mean, we've seen non-quarterbacks throw touchdowns. We've seen running backs throw touchdowns. Sometimes it's these ducks that just find a wide open guy or something like that. I mean, that was objectively a incredible pass, no matter who it was, whether it's a trained quarterback for all his life or a running back that's coming into the equation there. So yeah, that drive was something very, very special against a incredibly good UCLA defense. UCLA on offense, they were a little beleaguered as well, down to their third string quarterback, and that had its effect. But ASU was facing some big dogs on defense for the Bruins, and that, like you said, that drive really, really got it done. So among a game where there may not have been a ton of all-star performances on offense, like you mentioned, the total offense numbers don't look incredibly great, though they kind of took a hit there down at the end, when they were running out the clock. They lost a bunch of yards there, so that didn't help. But yeah, and it just the offense did what it needed to do. It was as unconventional as humanly possible, but the plays were made when the plays needed to be made, and they walked out the victors.
So I want to get your take though, because there's the one sequence that a lot of fans were debating kind of in real time, and just in the second half when ASU intentionally took some penalties and moved back, I believe it was 20 yards or so. But I at first I'm like, what are they doing? Because they came out and they were lined up for like not even Kenny's this freaking crazy to go for it. But then they took the delay, and then but then I noticed like the game clock itself was moving. So Kenny is obviously such a has an eye for detail. He knows like the minutia of the rule book, and I thought I was like I didn't hit me until I saw the game clock, and then ultimately they took about 2 minutes off the game clock. However, you surrendered the field position on what would be UCLA's only touchdown drive of the night. What are your thoughts in kind of that? It was just another kind of weird Kennyism.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can believe that it's intentional, and if it was in its entirety, it was masterfully done. Because I mean, you saw some of the false starts that made perfect sense, because I think there were where Latu was lined up. So I mean, and I think it was not, it's a true freshman going against one of the best pass rushers in college football. So it would make sense for that to be like a normal, false start, not intentional. Whatever it was, if it was intentional, it was hidden very well, masterfully crafted. It's one of those things that if it works, which it did, then you can celebrate it. If it would have resulted in a quick comeback by UCLA, and if ASU would have walked out with a loss, then that would have been highly debated. But we've seen those a lot. That's kind of Kenny Dillingham by his very nature, is it's going to be high risk, high reward, and that was the reward scenario. You think back to games like Cal and others where there were plays that backfired. Again, we fully embrace the weird, so I can't knock it if it works, which it did.
Yeah, so weird, wild, and I just kind of, one of many weird elements. But you know what was not weird, Joe? The ASU defense. They were absolutely on their game, and this was great to see because they, of course, were run all over, embarrassed after the 55 points they surrendered to Utah just a week ago. But it seems like more and more that Utah game was the aberration, because for the other games so far this season, they've been great, and this was another masterful performance, just like Washington holding the Bruins just a single touchdown. And most notably, 0 for 4, or I could say 0 for 4 on the game, but 0 for 3 in some critical short yardage, fourth down situations. We talked about Deshaun Mallory being a key part of those, but just Kenny talked about those fourth down moments are the moments that decide games, and ASU's defense was on point and did not relent in those critical moments.
Yeah, Deshaun Mallory having the game of his life, or at least of his Sun Devil career. Chris Edmonds, another 7 tackles. He's a guy that's just kind of quietly had a very, very good season. Tate Romney, the numbers may not jump off the page, 3 tackles, but a sack. That was very, very important when that happened. I was really impressed by the performance from Shamari Simmons. This is a guy who's been doing it quite a bit this season. 5 tackles, 3 pass deflections,
right here,
a big fumble recovery. There you go. Yeah, he gets the big board there. Very, very deserving. He's someone that has really had some moments. He had a big performance against Washington and a huge one against the Bruins. So just a gutsy team effort. Again, you if you were just look at the box score, if you didn't watch the game and you're just doing the Sunday morning thing, reviewing it, some of it doesn't really leap off the page to you. But to see the forest for the trees and what these guys were doing, not only for the game in its entirety, but those crucial moments when plays need to be made, where in the past years we've seen Sun Devil defenses bend and break and let things up when a lot was on the line. They came to play at the most important moments.
It was great to see just a Sun Devil team going through a hard year, just digging down deep and fighting. There's no give, there's no relent in this group of Kenny Dillingham Sun Devils, and I think that's one of the more promising aspects of the future as he continues to rebuild and reshape Sun Devil football through the end of this year and for the years to come. So before we talk to a couple of those key Sun Devil players as well, it's time to talk to you a little bit about the good brand, the folks at homefieldapparel.com. Now, of course, Joe, the holidays are coming up. And so there's obviously some ASU fans in your life and perhaps some fans and alums of other schools as well. It's a good thing that Home Field Apparel's got you covered. Of course, their 25-piece ASU collection is top-notch, including the most recent edition of an absolutely stellar bomber jacket that's a part of that collection as well. But, of course, T-shirts, joggers, hoodies, crew necks, everything that you want for the Sun Devil fan in your life or other programs as well. They have over 175 great schools. There's a lot of cool new releases for basketball season and for the upcoming Black Friday sale. There'll be some more information coming soon. Absolutely great deals that are going to be on the way. But a great deal that you can have right now is 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. Just using offer code SOTD23 at checkout. 15% off just using SOTD23 at homefieldapparel.com. All right, so after Tuesday's practice, talking to a couple of those key contributors on the offensive side of the ball. Now let's start off with the starting quarterback, tight end Jalin Conyers. He is going to be talking about, obviously the weird and wild formations there. Asking about, playing quarterback in the Rose Bowl, kind of that surreal thing, and kind of the culmination of maybe a year-long campaign to kind of get to allow Kenny Dillingham to let him throw the ball a little bit later on. And then after that, you'll hear from offensive lineman Cade Briggs, the Texas Tech transfer, who has really been a key part when he's been able to be in the lineup with his versatility. A guy who's played primarily guard, is able to play center, but against the Bruins was playing left tackle, the fourth different guy so far this season to start at left tackle. So it's had some good things to say about just kind of the weirdness and wildness of this of a season of adversity that has been going on through the offensive line room.
Ball, we called it. I was like, all right, Scat. I was like, Scat, please, make a good throw. And he set up, and I saw pressure in his face. I got kind of scared, and I was on silent. I saw him throw it, and it wiggled a little bit. So I was like, oh, I don't know if it's a good ball, but it landed right where, right in Badger's lap. So obviously super cool. I got super excited for him on silent. It was a super cool moment. I mean, shoot, that's his second touchdown pass. Maybe
one got called back.
One did get called back. Okay, yeah, but I mean, he's tied for second on touchdown passes this year. So. It's super cool. I mean, Scat is Mr. Do-It-All around Tempe, so he's Mr. Tempe. So,
is he the team's punt, pass, and kick champ then?
Literally, he's definitely punting. Kicking, I might be able to get him in kicking. Passing, I don't know, I'm probably going to take T still, but no, I mean, it's just super cool to be able to see how versatile players can be. But it's super cool for Scat. I was happy for him.
Did you ever think that you'd be throwing passes in the Rose Bowl during a game?
Oh, hell no. What? No. I mean, it's so funny because I always would talk to Dilly hey, bro, let me throw one pass. And then it's that one, when you be careful what you wish for moments, because then you end up playing quarterback for a good point out of the game. So it was definitely nerve-wracking. I remember the first snap, I was shaking my hands. I was nervous. But no, it's super cool. I mean, it's just that's something you dream of. I mean, obviously, I got to play in the Rose Bowl for the last time, obviously, in the Pac and stuff like that. So, I mean, we may never play UCLA again, in recent years while I'm here, obviously. But, I mean, it's just super cool to be in the Rose Bowl, to experience a moment like that, be able to go and say, I threw a pass in there, and I got to be one of the last players to play in there. It's definitely a super cool moment for me.
So did you, I know you have always had confidence in that arm. Did you campaign for kind of, that role to get a chance?
I put in, I may have said some things over the past, year or and a half or so. But, it's just, obviously I played quarterback in high school, so I think it was cool to be able to be versatile out there, run different things. So, being able to run it last week was super cool. Obviously this week, have a different game plan coming in. We're going to figure everything out. But, it was definitely a super cool moment I won't forget for sure.
What's it like?
What have you learned about yourself this year that's going to help you be a better version of yourself in the future?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is knowing it's going to be okay. Especially when in situations like this, when you're having a season like this, obviously the morale around the team is still good. Obviously we have, our goals that we want to reach and stuff still. And so too, even for me personally, obviously stat-wise, whatever you want to call it, the year that not a lot of people necessarily expected. Hell, I didn't even expect it, but it's still, if we're winning football games, I don't really care. I just want to win. I want to be able to, help the team win, whether it's running for 14 yards and throwing for 2 yards and we win the game, or having 100 yards receiving. So, it's just one of those things where it's great to see us come out with a win like that. Everyone kind of asks me oh, you're not playing as much, this and that. But, for me, it's just everybody that's getting to play on the field deserves to play. The whole tight room deserves to play. Me, Ryan, Basad, Bryce, we all deserve to play. We've all got our balanced reps, and it's nice. It's great to be able to go out there and run. You get to run 2 plays as hard as you can. And then the other guy comes in and does the same thing. So it's super cool to see, but, it's just, for me, it's just a learning experience, hey, everything's going to be okay. You don't got to play 60 snaps in a game to be effective. You don't got to play 50 snaps in a game to be effective. You can play 10 and you can still, help your team win. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I've learned.
It's kind of hard to be self-critical, especially when you're young and you're one of the better players. From this experience, have you examined more about, how to maximize your own potential and ability?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about that for me is I try to remember where I started when I first got here, and I didn't like blocking at all. I didn't want to I wanted to play tight end, but I didn't want to block. I was let everyone else do that. So, you know, I kind of had to, you know, grow up and be like, hey, like, if you want to be a good tight end and you want to get drafted and do all this stuff, like, you're going to have to, like, eat it. So, you know, I think that was kind of the big thing, even, like, spring ball, fall camp. You know, I was just trying to get better at that. And then, obviously, like, I mean, probably the coolest thing that I've ever had happen to me was making that PFF team, and I didn't catch a pass, honestly. And I know we got our ass whooped, but still, like, I never thought I'd be in that situation, so it was super cool. But yeah, I think just the biggest thing is, like, you can go watch all the good plays and when you're done playing and all that cool stuff. But right now, it's like trying to figure out the stuff I'm bad at, or the stuff I need to work on and get better at it. So that's kind of what I'm focused on right now, and just, you know, learning with everything and, like, taking everything with a grain of salt. Like, you know what, like, hey, I didn't do this good, but next week we're gonna go out and do better. So
we took the trend a few minutes ago. Obviously, he's a roommate. Can you just take us behind the scenes of those quarterback discussions last week?
Basically, I told him, I was, you know, a little over my head. I said I'm probably gonna throw for more yards, probably more touchdowns, but, you know, I was just talking. So, but, you know, it was super cool. It's like weird, like, being in there, and it's like, hey, bro, like, we're competing. You know, who plays more? Like, you know, they might put me in if I play good. So it was funny just joking with them and didn't have a good time and, like, saying, like, hey, don't throw a bad ball. Like, they'll put me in. Like, don't be scared. They see me in practice. So, but it was super cool. We got to talk about it. Obviously, got to watch a lot of film together, and I got to ask a bunch of questions about, like, reading the ends and stuff like that. So it was super cool, and they ended up working out, obviously. So after the game, it was a good little laugh. I was like, I went 2 for 2 for 2 yards, and I drew 2 PIs. So I'm 4 for 4 on the day. So
are you competing more with Trent or competing more with Cam?
I don't know. Scats might be beating us both right now, but no, it's just be all three of us. You know, like, Scat came over and, like, we all just hang out, joke around, play Madden, and talk about football. We watched the game yesterday, and we were all just talking about, like, you know, how super cool that was that all three of us got to be, like, in that group and, like, throw a pass and get to play in the Rose Bowl and stuff like that. So it's a super cool moment. But yeah, I'm definitely competing against Scat right now. Scat has a touchdown, so, you know, if I get to go back in a quarterback, my goal is to throw one. I got to at least tie it up. So
What's it like being, you know, having the staff YouTube and stuff on a Tuesday, and you guys are out there running in the Rose Bowl on Saturday?
You said what?
Like a staff that's like looking up stuff up on YouTube, you know, with the swinging gate formation and such, and then implementing it on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. And I just want to, I'm not going to take credit, but I told him I ran swinging gate in high school. I told him that when he got here. So I was like, if you ever want to throw it, so I'm going to take a little credit. But no, Coach Marv is like, he just kind of, he had told us like, hey, if you want to get your players out in space, you want to do something different, like, that's something cool. So obviously Coach Dilly went and looked that up, and then we got to, you know, kind of experiment, play with it on Saturday, and it worked out. So, you know, it's obviously super cool. You know, I mean, like, you don't see a lot of colleges like doing crap like that. Like, honestly, like, I remember, like, literally, I did it in high school at a 2A high school where I went to school with 28 kids. So, like, it's, you don't see that stuff. So, like, you know, it's super cool. And obviously you get to see, like, sometimes, you know, when you put the right game plan together and stuff, like, it's going to work. So obviously it ended up working. We came out with W. So, you know, obviously we're on to Oregon now, but no, definitely super cool moment. It's a game I'll definitely never forget.
What does it mean from, like, a player's perspective, just to know that a coaching staff's going to basically kind of look under every stone and kind of do everything possible to find out the best game plan, however unorthodox, to put you guys in the best position to succeed?
It's awesome because it just tells you how much work they put in, especially, you know, I mean, shoot, we're dealing with so many injuries and so many nicks and this and that, like, whatever. So, you know, it's just like for them to be able to go, like, you know what, we got to go the extra mile to find something that's going to work, to put guys and players in spots that are going to be successful. So, you know, obviously it worked out. Like, I didn't catch I caught one pass, but I got to run the ball for a lot of times and got a lot of first downs and got to do stuff like that. So, you know, it's just putting guys in spots that are going to help us be successful and win. And obviously you got to see that Scats, I don't know if you want to call him a quarterback, but a wildcat quarterback, but he can throw it a little bit. But, you know, I mean, it's just super cool. So, you know, I got told I had a really quick release. So that made me feel really good.
The arm looked good.
Someone told me I look like Aaron Rodgers, so I'll take it. And I was like, hey, I mean, I wear 12 for a reason. So, but, you know, obviously, you know, the coaches did a great job. They had a great game plan. You know, I mean, shoot, they're being unorthodox, but hey, it worked. So, you know, obviously they're going to keep that path going forward. We got obviously Oregon and then a really good U of A team so that we're going to get to play in the next 2 weeks. So we're excited to see what's going to come up and how the game plan's going to fit.
Dillingham acknowledged Saturday that earlier this year you challenged him, right, to take steps forward. Now that you're some weeks removed from the tweet situation, I'm curious what you've learned since then and how that moment might have what you took in terms of perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd be completely honest. In the first couple of games, I sucked. I didn't play well. I didn't hustle. I didn't play hard. I mean, I was kind of just out there going with. I don't want to say going through emotion, but kind of just worrying about, you know, where I wanted to be. I wasn't really like focused on my routes. Like, I was worried about getting open instead of running the right route, doing this and that. So obviously having a meeting with him, getting to talk to him, and, you know, obviously after I was sick and the whole Colorado game situation, we kind of had to sit down and talk about, like, hey, like, this is what you need to do in order to be successful. And, you know, obviously a mutual respect between me and him and a good friendship and a great relationship. You know, he told me, like, hey, this is what I want to see for you. And then, you know, the next 2 games, I had 2 of the best games I've had. So probably the 2 best games I have had. I'm going to count this past one too, just because I ran the ball better. But like, I mean, it was a challenge. I mean, he told me like, hey, you can either do this or like you can just, we can play Bryce Ryan Messiah. And I was like, obviously, yeah, they deserve it. So, it's super cool. Obviously, we all deserve reps. We all did a good job. I think I've tried to do my best, embrace the challenge, keep moving forward. And obviously, me and him have always been had a great relationship. There's never really been any problems, kind of just, well, obviously there's miscommunication sometimes between players and coaches, but, obviously me and him were able to have a conversation that did, obviously it worked, and, me and him are all good. And, obviously I'm just trying to embrace this challenge and keep moving forward, and try to play my two best games these last 2 games.
All right, Cade, so how good did it feel just to finally get out there and get a win, especially in an atmosphere like the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, no, it definitely felt good going back to my home state, California. It felt good. Somewhere, I've always dreamed about playing, and especially got to kick out to left tackle, so that was fun, and, we got the win. Yeah,
obviously, you have that versatility. It takes the reps at center, starts at guard, then kicking out. What was that experience like, just, playing left tackle against a defensive front that's, got some dudes?
Yeah, no, it was definitely fun, a little stressful, getting back into it after a few years. It took me a few practices, but once I got out there and got into the flow of the game, I felt good.
What's it been like just this season? Obviously, so many injuries, just like, specifically on the offensive line, just, how you and the guys have kind of dealt with it as a unit, kind of the ups and downs, and just kind of the week-to-week differences.
Yeah, no, we're definitely really resilient. Every single week there's something new or something happening, someone getting hurt, and, these aren't, muscle strains or small injuries. People are out for the season. So, we're just fighting every single time we come out here, and, we're doing whatever we can.
What's it been like to see, like, Coach Tuatele just, kind of lead this room against, so much adversity and the obstacles, and kind of keep everything together and keep the standard of play high?
Yeah, no, he's definitely, staying on top of us. He's hard on us during the week, because then when we go into the game and, everything's going crazy, we're down on bodies, it's a super relaxed atmosphere for us. And he does that every week for us, and he gets us ready for sure.
All right, so the swinging gate formation obviously caught a lot of attention. What is that like from an offensive lineman's perspective?
Yeah, no, it's definitely fun. Knowing that their defensive line was very good and very disruptive, we wanted to take that away from them, and spacing them out, and you can see how frustrated they were in the first half. We're taking their best players away from the game, and doing a whole different thing on the other side of the field. So it was nice to frustrate them and take their best players away.
How did you see that frustration? How did you see that kind of manifest on the field?
Yeah, because they want to line up and rush the passer and just play normal football, because what we were doing out there was obviously something very unique and different, and they just wanted to rush the passer and do what they do best, but we took that away from them.
What was your kind of reaction when the coaching staff came to you guys and said, like, this is going to be kind of a significant chunk of this week's game plan?
Yeah, no, it was kind of crazy because we didn't rep it a whole lot in practice. We probably did, I think it was like 10 minutes of it during practice. And then when we went to the game and it started working and it started flowing, and we kept running it, and I was like, okay, we're just going to go with whatever's working right now.
Is that something you've ever done before?
I don't think so. I don't think I've done it. I've seen it before, but I've never done it.
Obviously, looking ahead, a big, tough test against Oregon. What are some things that kind of jump out about the Oregon Duck defense?
Yeah, no, their front, they're really big, strong dudes. They're not really big finesse guys, but, big power guys. They're going to try to go through you, and, that's the challenge we have this week. Last week it was more finesse guys and speedy guys, and now this week it's more bigger bodies and, a lot of power that we've got to deal with.
What are some of the kind of the goals that you want to accomplish, yourself, but, just these last 2 weeks? Of course, the rivalry game coming up the next week. Obviously, not look ahead too far, but just to end the season, it's been kind of, a difficult season overall, but just to end on a high note.
Yeah, definitely just for the O-line to perform well, carry it on into the next year. Obviously, we're down bodies and we're playing with people all over the place, but if we can just continue to try to play well and do what we do best, I think that'll be a good note.
How do you think that this, going through a year of adversity, injuries, just kind of the ups and downs, and everything that this team has had to go through, what kind of lessons have you been able to draw from that?
I feel like there's so many. Every single week there's a new guy going out, new positions, and, you got to really learn how to be, you're playing, like for me, for example, I'm playing left tackle, I'm playing center, I'm playing guard. You got to be very comfortable all over the place. You got to know the plays all over the place, and then you got to get in the rhythm with new guys. You're playing next to new guys every single week, and it takes a few practices to get that bond together and that feel. And we got a group of really resilient guys here.
How do you think that kind of sets the stage for the future of just having that versatility, having to go through for looking ahead to next season, how this Sun Devil team will be more well equipped?
Yeah, no, it's definitely big. Knowing that Sean can play left tackle, left guard, knowing I can kind of bounce all over around, and we got people that are very versatile. Worst case scenario, God forbid this happens again next year, but we can play wherever and still be successful with it.
Now, before we jump into our Know Your Enemy segment and get a deep dive on the Oregon Ducks, bring all your friends, all your enemies, whether you like them, whether you don't, bring them all in to Burrito Express, which, of course, is a family-owned business that began in 1995 with a combination of authentic recipes, competitive prices, and a comfortable atmosphere. That all makes dining with Burrito Express a unique experience, and I've had that experience. I can say it's unique and certainly well worth your time and your dollar bills. You've seen the passion on Twitter. You've seen how incredibly active they are with supporting Sun Devil student athletes with a multitude of NIL deals. Safe to say, like we always tell you, if you're part of the Sun Devil family, part of the Sun Devil community, Burrito Express is a business well worth your support. And by the way, it's not just doing a nice thing to some nice people. The food they have, absolute top notch, complete fire. You cannot go wrong, no matter what your style is with the burritos, whether it's the breakfast burritos or the ones a little bit more on like the lunch dinner angle. You can get it all there. So Burrito Express has 6 Valley locations, 2 in Gilbert, 1 in Mesa, 1 in Chandler, 1 in Scottsdale, and the Tempe location near Rural and University, just about a half mile from Mountain America Stadium. So if you're getting out there early for that tailgate against Oregon, which, you know, for that 2 o'clock kickoff, you might be getting there in the AM time, get yourself some breakfast burritos. That's the perfect way to tailgate for a Sun Devil football game. They're open from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, while some locations are open as early as 6 a.m. during the week, and they're open 8 to 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. You can order online at theburritoexpress.com for pickup or delivery, and be sure to give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BurritoEXP and on TikTok at BurritoExpressAZ.
Joining us now to get an inside look at the number 6 ranked Oregon Ducks is James Crepea of the Oregonian, excuse me. James, thanks for coming on tonight. How are you tonight?
Doing well. How you guys doing?
Doing real well. Before we jump into this week's game, first, what's the overall feel around the Oregon Duck community surrounding the big move to the Big Ten Conference starting next year?
Well, it's certainly not been front and center for a couple of months now, quite honestly, other than the litigation that's ongoing with the Pac-12 and Pac-2 and departing Pac-10. But outside of that, truly go back to the news at the time that it occurred, certainly a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. And I think really the only development since is obviously the announcement of the next season's football schedule, the opponents, and then obviously the week by week since. And again, people are really excited about that. I mean, look, you compare to, we never would have known exactly what the Pac-12 schedule would have been next season because they never announced one in the divisionless format. They never got to that point. So you can only go back of what the old division-based schedule would have been. If you compare the schedule of opponents or even any amalgamation thereof to what Oregon is going to play. I mean, if you're a season ticket holder, you have to be ecstatic about what Oregon is going to get to do. I mean, they were supposed to host Ohio State in 2020. One of the many games was lost due to COVID. They rescheduled that series for in the 2030s, which now is a moot point, but they did. You're thinking you're not going to get a chance to have that game, which is going to be one of the bigger home games in program history for 10 or 12 years. Instead, you're getting it next year. You're going to Michigan, you're going to Wisconsin. That's big. That's important. Those are, again, that's significant. Now, it's ironic that for Oregon's historic purposes, that the first Big Ten conference game is at the Rose Bowl against UCLA, which is a kind of a roundabout way of doing it. Not the first Big Ten conference game for UCLA's purposes, but be it all as it may. Again, a lot of excitement, I think, from fans, from alums, from certainly people inside the athletic department of the university, a lot of upside, enormously. And again, I think we were going to get there. I say we, I think college football, college sports was going to get to this point in an eventuality, regardless, whether it was this past summer or it was 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, had the Pac-12 managed to hold together for one more media deal. This was an eventuality. It just was. This was the economics of things, and yes, Oregon, Washington, and the LA schools to the Big Ten, but also the corner schools going to the Big 12. I think there's a lot of advantageous situations there for those schools.
So now, of course, this weekend's game pits 2 head coaches against each other who know one another very, very well, in Dan Lanning and Kenny Dillingham. What do you think that familiarity adds to this matchup Saturday, as far as whether it's fun storylines or even some competitive advantages from knowing one another so well?
Well, certainly some fun storylines. I mean, look, anytime there's people who work together before, particularly when it's a head coach and a coordinator, and then turned head coach in particular, with his crossover with a very prominent quarterback, and frankly, maybe even two prominent quarterbacks. In that, Oregon was among the many schools who was recruiting Jaden Rashada, going back at that time as well, among others. I mean, you have a couple of transfers each way, though they're not necessarily in extremely prominent positions on each team. So there's all that kinds of intrigue. But in terms of between the coaches, again, I would say even goes beyond the idea of, well, Kenny worked here a year ago and naturally was friendly with Dan. I mean, he was Dan's first hire, pretty much immediately out the chute after landing the job here. And why? Because they go back, because they've worked together before at multiple spots, including at ASU. Albeit, it was kind of a fringe capacity for Kenny at the time when he was still in the high school ranks. But bottom line, like, yeah, they go back a long way, and those conversations and those, all of those just talks that young coaches have when they're coming up, and ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other, and what would you do with this and what would you do with that? I mean, that goes back over a decade. So that, like I say, makes for a fun aspect for the game. Certainly fun talking points and storylines. But when you talk about in terms of once the game begins, what does it mean? It means that these are two guys who are highly competitive, who are probably going to try to out scheme and outsmart each other a little bit, and they know how each other think pretty well. So that will be interesting and intriguing. I think it would be even more interesting and intriguing if Kenny was a couple more years into his tenure and had ASU in a little bit better position. But nevertheless, I will not put it before Kenny at all that he would pull out all the punches and all the stops, much as he did a week ago.
Of course, in Dillingham's absence, the Oregon offense still an absolute juggernaut, leading the nation in scoring, at the top of the charts in many other categories. That's under first-year offensive coordinator Will Stein, who, of course, replaced Dillingham as OC for the Ducks. What's enabled Stein to be so massively successful here in year one with Oregon?
Well, when you inherit one of the best quarterbacks in college football, that helps. That's a good start. And with that, when this program enhanced what was already a great offense under Kenny and with what they did a year ago, by surrounding Bo Nix with even more and better skill position players, particularly at the wide receiver core, that'll do it. That's it. I mean, yes, is the offensive line playing extraordinarily well? Yes. And they had to replace 4 starters from a year ago and all that? Yes. But they were going to be at a competitive advantage based on the talent and ability that they had in the room that was coming up to replace those guys, combined with a couple of guys they brought in. They were going to have a competitive advantage there. I don't really care whether the quarterback was the same or not, whether the receiving core was changing or not, or whether the OC was changing or not. They were going to have a competitive advantage there regardless. Surrounding Bo Nix with more and better weapons is what has allowed for this offense for the potential for it to be there, for it to be more productive. With that, combining, Nix's experience, and again, he has command and control of the offense that Kenny gave him in the first place, and that it has stayed under Will Stein, where you don't see very many college quarterbacks who have this amount of autonomy, this amount of on-field autonomy. I mean, under Kenny, Bo quite literally could have audibled to anything, because there was that level of trust there that he could audible to anything because he wasn't going to audible to anything that was ridiculous, and that's pretty much true now. But nevertheless, you surround great players with more great players, possibilities there for even more success, production, points, yards, etc. And they're doing it. And that's a credit to, first and foremost, the players, because they're the ones doing it. But yes, credit also where it is due that Kenny was able to achieve what he did a year ago, and that Will Stein is doing it now as the OC this year.
So talking about Bo Nix, obviously a tremendous season a year ago. And it looks like he's taken a couple steps forward so far this year as well, even better production. Where have you seen kind of Nix make those strides from last year to this year?
It's kind of a combined couple of areas. One, last year, they ran Bo more by design and probably did a little bit more in the RPO game last year under Kenny. I don't know how much of that is truly a seismic strategic shift from Kenny to Will per se, as I would say it's probably more of a strategic shift to not have your Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback take that many hits if you can avoid it. And again, when you surround him with more weapons, frankly, had Oregon had the depth at receiver under Kenny that they have now, I'm not sure that Kenny would have run Bo as much as they did a year ago, in fairness. So you say, like, well, what got better or what's changed? What's changed is the skill around him. And then how they've gone about utilizing him as a result of that. I think it kind of goes hand in hand there. I don't think it's just, well, Will Stein's not going to ever have an RPO based offense. Well, they do some RPO stuff or have a heavily mobile quarterback. No, he's had mobile quarterbacks before. Frank Harris at UTSA is a pretty mobile quarterback. Uh, I just think they were trying to prevent Bo from taking the volume of hits that he took a year ago. They still run him in short yardage. They still do under center, QB sneaks and stuff, just like most every offense in the country. But in terms of the volume of yards, that's gone down, which correspondingly means that he's probably passing a bit more, and he is. So that's part of it. What's changed most, I would say, is probably a little bit more schematic and strategic than anything. But it's because of that, like I say, the surrounding skill position talent that I talked about before. And like I say, and in fairness, that if Oregon had it a year ago, I'm not sure that Kenny would have gone about it the same way because, case in point, Oregon's number 2 receiver in terms of yards last year is at best number 6 in the rotation in this year and basically isn't playing. So that just, goes to show and underscore, like, yeah, they brought in 3 transfer receivers and one of them's up to over 700 yards and sure looks like he could top 1,000 just as Troy Franklin did. Uh, they didn't have that a year ago. They didn't. And Chase Cota was a nice receiver a year ago. And if he didn't get hurt, maybe he could have at least, given it a shot to get awfully close. But they didn't even get a 1,000-yard receiver a year ago. Now they got one, and they might have 2. That's only happened once in program history, and that was 25 years ago. So that's part of the difference. Is just surround a great quarterback with more, like I say, with more really good receivers. It opens some things up.
Let's talk about those receivers. Obviously, you mentioned Troy Franklin already over 1,000 yards. I believe he's on a program record type of pace right now. Who are the weapons that Bo Nix has at his disposal that ASU fans need to watch out for?
Well, it certainly starts with Troy. You can't underscore that enough. He's already over 1,000. I'm sure ASU fans don't want to see him set the program record for receiving yards in a season, but he's not too far off. He needs less than 100 to do that. And if it's not this week, it'll be the week after. He's going to get there. He's had multiple, many 100-yard games this season. Seems like every defense knows they have to try to contain the guy, and they can't. And it's a credit both to Bo, to Troy, to Will Stein, and the rest of the receiving core. Because again, if the talent gap was that significant, every opposing defensive coordinator would just double team and bracket Troy Franklin all day and prevent you from getting the ball. But when your next option is Tess Johnson, who's one of the fastest receivers at the very least in the conference, if not the country. He was already that at Troy. He was already a very productive receiver a year ago in the Sun Belt. One of the most productive, go by Pro Football Focus numbers and that kind of stuff. They loved him a year ago. And he has translated, his game is translated to the Pac-12 incredibly well because it's hard to teach speed. When that guy gets open in the open field, there's just not very many defensive backs, especially in this league, who can keep up with him. So that opens up things for him when you have a guy like Troy. That opens up things for Troy when you have a guy like him to complement it. And when you can add in a Gary Bryant Jr., who had a bigger role earlier in the year, he had a couple of catches though last week against his former team in USC, to where that certainly helped as well. And he's been a nice complimentary piece. Trayshawn Holden, an Alabama transfer, also. That's their top 4 receivers. And like I say, the top 2, it's a pretty significant separation. And oh yeah, by the way, Terrence Ferguson, a tight end, who probably on the short list of certainly an all-conference caliber tight end. I'm not sure if the production will necessarily get there to where he'll lead the league among tight ends this year. He could. He has the talent and ability to. I don't know if he'll end up getting there, but bottom line, yeah, they've got the weapons, to say the least. They've got legitimately 5 deep between the receiver position and throwing tight end as well, to where, yeah, they're just very hard to contain and slow down. And oh yeah, by the way, a running back core with Bucky Irving, who might be the best running back in the league, regardless of yards, production, or anything else. Might be the best running back in the league. It's a lot. So, and they throw to him out of the backfield a lot.
Yeah, so talking about those backs, Irving with I believe 40 catches or so, but that 1-2 punch of Bucky Irving and Jordan James, both guys seem to be averaging right around 7 yards a carry, which is pretty nice, and obviously probably maybe another reason why Bo's not running too much. What makes this Oregon ground game so dangerous as well?
Because they've got those two guys. They've got more than that, but Noah Whittington suffered a season-ending injury, so that was unfortunate. That's really their one major injury almost across the entire team. They've been really fortunate in that regard. They've had nicks and bruises and guys who even this past game the top three corners go down, but they're all back at practice this week. But in terms of long-term injury, the one to Whittington was significant. But Irving was the lead back a year ago. He's better this year. Jordan James was the third back a year ago, much more of a short yardage goal line guy. Saw the role expand in non-conference play when Whittington went down. His role has expanded since. He's done very nicely. And then they've got a couple of freshmen behind that where, in the event of blowout kind of games, they've been able to mix them in. But ultimately, those lead two backs are significant. And again, go back a year ago with Kenny running things, a very similar running back core, basically the same outside of the freshman, but Nick's had a more prominent role, and the passing game had to be just different from a volume of passes standpoint. Now they're more passing oriented, don't need to run Bo as much, but that's because the wide receiver core got deeper. So the running game is successful because uh, the passing game is so prolific that it makes it very, very, very hard on defenses. Secondly, because the offensive line, like I say, has just got a competitive advantage against everybody, they're opening up some huge lanes. And that's not to discredit how productive the backs have been, but it's just calling it what it is. Some of this, their jobs are made easier by an offensive line who's doing an incredible job. That said, Bucky Irving, when he gets a head of steam behind him, they, I, there hasn't been a defense out there in this season who's been able to take him down on first contact. There just isn't, and he's barreling through. It doesn't matter if you're. I don't care what level of defense you're on, but if you're a linebacker or a safety, good luck. For a guy who is not a power back by way of size, you're talking about a running back who's under 200 pounds, which is perfectly normal. But he plays like a running back who's 225 pounds. He just barrels through guys. He runs really hard, really determined. And then, like I say, when he gets that head of steam because the O line is opening up some things for him, yeah, he's a tough guy to bring down.
I believe Oregon is the only team in the country to score over 30 points in every single game so far this season. Obviously, we talked about Bo Nix having his incredible success, the depth at wide receiver, tight end, the backfield. What does the defense have to do to even have a chance to kind of limit or slow down the Ducks a little bit?
I think what an opposing defense has to do is get a lot of help from its offense. Uh, if I were most any team in the league, with the exception of Washington specifically. Uh, but if I were most any other team in the league playing Oregon, I would really try to play them much the way that Stanford attempted to before the talent gap simply could no longer bear it anymore. And that's by sustaining extraordinarily long drives, playing possession football. I'm not telling you that this is entertaining, but if you're trying to win, you need your offense to go out there and have 10 and 12 and 14 play drives that take 6, 7, and 8 minutes off the clock. If you're an opposing defense, you want Oregon's defense to be worn down. You want to keep their offense off the field. And in part, that's going to be on your own execution. In part, it's going to be by your offense, helping you out. And I think stylistically, any team that does not have the potency and the firepower of Oregon or Washington in the passing attack needs to strategically try to go about it. Like I say, much the way Stanford attempted to. I think the way Utah was trying to before any number of things went off the rails for them as well. To where, yeah, you have to play more of a possession style game. Again, I'm not telling you it's the most entertaining, but that's probably the way to do it because you can't count on all kinds of disruption in the backfield. This offensive line has allowed the least amount of sacks in the country, and this fifth-year senior quarterback is getting rid of the ball very, very quickly, and he doesn't put the ball in jeopardy by way of interceptions, fumbles, or anything else. It's just not happening. the skill position players aren't fumbling the ball just by their own accord anyway. So turnovers aren't happening. Pressure's not easy to generate. How else can you do it? Especially when there's a talent gap. Well, good luck. That's why I say, like, I think you have to try to offensively, first and foremost, bleed the clock as much as possible, possess the ball as much as possible, and help your defense insofar as shorten the game for them. Try to wear down Oregon's defense as far as you can. And if you can shorten the game, that'll help. But if you're trying to get anybody who's trying to get in a shootout with Oregon, you better have the firepower, like I say, of a Washington, with Penix and Adunze and Polk and those guys at receiver and McMillan and Bernard and et cetera. You better have that kind of arsenal of weapons, because if you don't, to your point, this is not an offense that's very easily contained. It's just not. So good luck to any opposing defense trying to slow them down, especially in this league. It's just not going to be an easy task.
And of course, trying to sustain those drives on the Oregon defense is no easy task, because the Ducks, of course, under Dan Lanning, have a pretty formidable unit, holding their opponents about 17 points per game, and the yards per play numbers are among the best in the country. Going up against that Oregon defense, what kind of game plan would an opposing OC should draw up, provided they don't have the firepower of a Washington?
Well, there's still questions, to be fair, and truly objective of this defense. Are they improved from a year ago? Absolutely. I mean, you'd be a fool to argue otherwise in any number of areas. Some of the biggest deficiencies that they had a year ago, particularly in pass rush, particularly in pass defense, and third down defense, they are just absolutely better in. Their run defense, which was good a year ago, is better this year, even if you took away all of the yards that they get the benefit of from those increased sack numbers. So their pass rush is better, and their run defense would be better even without the pass rush being better. So they are better and more talented than a year ago, unequivocally. However, there are still some, like I say, some weaknesses that really get underscored and pretty blatant when they start getting shorthanded. When their secondary, when their corners start going down due to injury, which has happened in multiple games this season, that gets exposed very badly. And if it's in a competitive spot with an opposing quarterback who can take advantage, and receiving core who can take advantage of it, we saw it happen with Washington. We saw it happen late with USC. The game had gotten away from them by the time it really mattered. But ultimately, there are still a couple of questions. At the top line, if Kyrie Jackson and Jaleel Florence are on the field at corner, they're in a great position against most everybody. And they're going to be in a competitive position against Washington specifically. They both went down on the same play against Washington. This past week, they go down, and their third corner, Dante Manning, went down. So by the end of the second half, by the end of the ball game, they're down to their fifth and sixth cornerbacks. I mean, if you do that to any team, things are going to get difficult. So if I were an opposing offense, try to run as much as one can, probably outside the box if you can manage to do it. You're going to have to need the speed, but I know that ASU's running back core has certainly got some talent there as well. If they can get outside the box and outside the tackles to do it, start there, because running inside the box against Oregon's defensive front, probably a losing proposition for most people, I would suggest. Then in the secondary, try to be selectively advantageous when certain matchups present themselves. Like I say, if Kyrie Jackson or Jaleel Florence are off the field at corner at any point, even just for a momentary breather, you have to try to take advantage of matchups when you get them. And for my money, I think Jackson might be the top corner in the league. I don't care what his production is. That, to me, has always been a terrible measure of cornerbacks. The best opposing quarterbacks that Oregon has played this season, in Penix and Caleb Williams and their respective coaches and offensive coordinators, they didn't test Kyrie Jackson on a repetitive basis. Yes, Washington had one touchdown against them, and there's a missed coverage from a safety, but beside the point, they're not testing him. They're going away from him. all the time. Uh, if he comes off the field, you have to be cognizant of that and try to take advantage of it. And when it's happened, opposing offenses have usually found their success when they're able to do that. So, like I say, I would start from the ground game perspective, trying to get to the edges a little bit. I think you saw a little bit from Cal, even, albeit it was turned into a little bit lopsided game. But I thought how Cal tried to open up by getting the ball on the perimeter. I'm sure Kenny saw some of that. I thought there were some interesting things that Jake Spavital did, and Spavital comes from the same tree as Kenny. He married and merged the air raid with the hurry up no huddle, whereas Kenny is more of a traditionalist in the hurry up no huddle with Norvell. But they both spent some time with Malzahn. I am sure that Kenny saw the Cal game and saw a couple of things that Spavital did that he could absolutely try to replicate and apply with more talent. And that doesn't necessarily mean he has to use the swinging gate, but if it has to, then that might work too.
So, pardon me, some of the things that you were mentioning just in the previous question lead into and maybe even answer my next question was on a team like Oregon with so many strengths, a team that's pretty much in control of its own destiny, not just in the Pac-12, but even into the college football playoff. What weaknesses, if you can even call that, or areas that may not be major strengths are ones that you can highlight, maybe in addition to the ones that you already mentioned?
Yeah, like I say, I start defensively where depth in the secondary, but you'd say that about almost every team in the country. But truly, where to me it just gets underscored because they had their top three corners go down this past game. Now, again, they're all at practice this week. They look to be moving around just fine today, so nothing to necessarily be alarmist about. But in the event that any of them are either limited in any way, shape, or form or don't play, certainly an area that opposing offense could take advantage of. Otherwise, like I say, there were some ways schematically that I thought the Cal attacked it that I thought were interesting. Uh, if you go back to Texas Tech, the way they did it, but that they did a lot with quarterback run there. If you can, especially if Rashada comes back, um, it's been a minute. And look, this is this in the next week or the season, obviously, for ASU's purposes. If you were to have the quarterback come back and then run him a whole bunch, I mean, if he's healthy enough to do it, but QB run is something that this defense has had a little bit of trouble with, and more than just one or two games. So that would be one element of it. Taking advantage when the corners are out of the game, the top corners are out of the game for any particular reason. Like I say, certain things, even when they're in the game, schematically, that I think, if done properly with the right personnel, with the right talent, the way that Cal attempted to free up and get the ball on the perimeter by not just getting on the perimeter to get, hey, go out and make plays in space. Yes. But they were doing it in a way to try to free up their best weapons, which they don't have a lot of, against Kyrie Jackson in particular and some of the other corners with varying degrees of success. I think the way that they tried to go about it, though, was sound. I'm not sure that the results necessarily were exactly what they wanted, but I think that what they were trying to do could be replicated. So if there were weaknesses to try to attack, like I say, QB run would be one. Two, trying to shorten the game through possession. Three, taking advantage, like I say, of the corners if they are out of the game, and whether they are or they aren't. Trying to get the ball on the perimeter, whether that's run game, QB run game, or quick action passes. This defense has, I'm not going to say has had trouble. That's probably an overstatement. But in select circumstances, it has been a bigger problem than other areas defensively in terms of just getting, when I'm talking about getting the ball on the perimeter through run and perimeter and passing when they're not in press man, or if it's done in a certain way via blocking and whatnot. I'm not going to get all the way into the weeds of that. But bottom line, I have no doubt that, like I say, that Kenny probably picked up on a couple of things that Cal did in particular, just because of how similar stylistically they are from an offensive play calling and strategy standpoint.
Obviously, a guy like Bo Nix, Bucky Irving, these are some of the biggest names in college football. But who's a guy or two that might be a little bit under the radar that you think is going to play a big role for deciding Saturday's outcome and also Oregon's playoff push?
Well, Tez Johnson is certainly a guy whose name is starting to become bigger and bigger with each passing game because, like I say, Troy Franklin is probably deserves a little bit more credit nationally than he's getting. I think he's starting to get it, but in particular this past week, I realized it was a late game, but pretty strong TV audience still. Both of them had enormous explosive pass plays immediately in that game, and that helps. Uh, they were both 100-yard receivers in that game because they had 70+ yard touchdowns apiece. Tez, like I say, I think Tez is kind of that X factor on offense because any team is going to have a lead back or a lead receiver. It's what is that next weapon, and what is it about them? Are they this just ginormous tight end type? Are they a speed guy? Are they a power back? What are they? Well, in Tez Johnson's case, like I say, his speed is just extraordinarily difficult to replicate and defend. I'm not sure, as I say, I'm not sure there's anyone else in the league who has a receiver quite like that. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to get too hyperbolic about like how many teams in the country have a receiver like that, but truly, like he's a special talent. He just is. And if if this quarterback's going to end up winning the Heisman and they end up having 2,000-yard receivers this season, it's going to be because Tez Johnson and what his ability is. That's a massive piece of it. Troy Franklin's an incredible receiver, deserves to be in the Blitnikoff conversation. Bo is obviously having an incredible season, probably going to be a Heisman finalist, if not win it. And Bucky Irving, like I say, one of the best backs in the country, still doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, nationally speaking, because he might be the best running back in the in the league on the number one offense in the country. And outside of those who've watched Oregon, I'm not sure how many people actually know the name Bucky Irving, quite honestly, which is a shame. But if there is that next guy offensively, like I say, it's got to be Tez Johnson because of just the skill and ability that he brings. That's just very hard to match and very, very hard to defend.
So as the regular season comes to a close in college football, the coaching carousel and the rumor mills start to swirl. And not saying you believe everything you read on the internet, but with that Texas A&M opening there, a lot of people are throwing out the name Dan Lanning as a possibility there. Any legitimate concern he might be a viable option and consider that move?
Well, Dan certainly addressed it, and that was as direct and as voiceful a dismantling of any any rumor, innuendo, or the like that I've ever seen or heard from a coach. And I've been doing this now for whatever I'm up to now, 10 or 12 years, including seeing coaches leave, including coaches stay, including coaches renegotiate contracts and all the like. Texas A&M is a great job. It's going to be appealing to any number of people. I'm sure they will hire a great head coach. Money is of no object. But as Dan said, he's never been motivated by that, and he doesn't just have to say that now. He hasn't been. He's made multiple moves in his career to indicate as such. So go by action, not just words. And I'm not the man's agent or his press secretary. Just objectively look at what he's done. But to say, when coaches are in this position, they usually don't want to say anything because they don't want egg in their face in case they end up doing, the other thing and taking the gig, or they're trying to negotiate something and they're worried about a better contract. And I'm not worried about that. Well, yeah, he's got he's got a contract with the 2028 season that if he wins on Saturday or the following week on the Friday, will automatically have a 1-year extension built into it between his guaranteed salary, deferred compensation, and the like. Could be owed somewhere in the realm of over $50 million. I understand A&M just spent 75 to fire Jimbo Fisher. I get it. But at some point, the questions are, how well compensated are you and your staff and the ability to compete there? And do you have all the resources available to win? That's basically what it boils down to for college football coaches at the highest level. How well taken care of are you? And do you feel like you can win? And especially like we talked about at the beginning with Oregon going to the Big Ten, that's part of how the contract came together this summer. And I think that answers the question in part about your ability to feel like you can win going forward, because they're recruiting really well, and they're going to continue to be able to recruit really well with everything they've got established here. And I think it's going to get a whole lot easier going to the Big Ten than it ever was in the Pac-12 era under various different coaches at Oregon in that time. So I'm sure A&M, like I say, will hire a great coach. But I was going to be surprised if it was Dan Lanning who would have taken it before Dan said anything. And I understand for opposing fan bases, especially, well, coaches always say these things. Coaches always say these things. They always lie. They always do whatever. And until every open seat is filled when the music stops, we all go through this every single year. But truly, like I would be mystified if Dan Lanning ended up taking the Texas A&M job. I really would, because I don't see him taking that particular job as the next thing. And he's spoken at length multiple times about the idea that, hey, moving your family X number of times when you have a 10, 12, and 13-year-old, and his oldest have lived in 8 states. I realize college football fans do not care one iota about the coach's children, but there is the human element of this. Well, it's easier with the money. Well, that's nice for you to say. I don't think that family has any motivation whatsoever to pick up and relocate their kids again, at all. Zero, in fact. I get that's why I say I'd be truly mystified if it were A&M, particularly at this time. I do not see it happening.
Well, awesome, James. Really appreciate the time, the expertise, and the insight into ASU's upcoming opponent. Encourage our folks to head over to the Oregonian and check out more of the great work there and get to know the Ducks before Saturday's big matchup. Thanks again, James.
Thanks, guys.
So now it's about time that we jump into our preview of ASU's upcoming opponent, the Oregon Ducks, to get a lot of information about Oregon and these massive events that have been happening this week in Sun Devil athletics. And coming up, there's going to be a huge game for ASU football next week. Basketball is going on. This is that crazy busy time of the year. And when you have that massive news bomb like happened on Monday, you got to consume all of the information and all of the content that you possibly can. And there is no better place online to do that than devilsdigest.com, which, of course, is a part of the rivals.com network. Become a subscriber. If for any of you who are maybe holding out contributions or involvement with all things Sun Devils until a change was made at the top, I'm talking to you. Go ahead and become a subscriber at Devil's Digest. Get all the information that you can, because the future could possibly be brighter for ASU athletics. So now, go ahead, do what we're telling you. Please become a subscriber of devilsdigest.com. You're going to get incredible content there. You're going to be part of an awesome community on the message boards in the huddle. You can't miss. You can learn it all about the Sun Devils and all the major sports. And also, you can get access to premium content across the rivals.com network to get a little insight on any other team you might want to check out. So it's always a win-win. But get on down to devilsdigest.com and become a subscriber today. So now ASU is hosting Oregon, coming to town, guided by second-year head coach Dan Lanning, who, as many know, spent some time at Arizona State University under Todd Graham. Another name that did the same, Kenny Dillingham. And, of course, those two coached together not just at Oregon last year when Dillingham was Lanning's OC in his first year with the Ducks. They coached together on Mike Norvell's staff at Memphis in 2016 and 2017. So needless to say, this matchup has quite a few storylines with these two coaches clashing for the first, maybe or maybe not last time, but certainly the last time for the foreseeable future. But there's a lot going on, a lot on the line when these two coaches go head to head.
Yeah, there's going to be obviously that familiarity there in terms of just, those guys and the closeness and the bond and the inside knowledge that Kenny has for, kind of institutional knowledge of that Duck program from his successful stint as their offensive coordinator a season ago. Obviously, there's some players that are back and forth. Connor Soley, former Saguaro and ASU linebacker, now with the Ducks as well. Bram Walden is now an ASU offensive lineman, unfortunately out of the lineup. But there's a lot of ties there. Not to mention that this is an Oregon Duck team that is number 6 in the country, that is chasing a playoff spot that right now, for my money, really looks like the most complete team in the conference. And I think the best bet to make a run and kind of end that Pac-12 playoff drought, and ironically enough, in the Pac-12's final season.
Now, the last time Oregon visited Tempe back in 2019, that number 6 ranking was familiar then as well, as that was what Oregon carried coming into that night game in what was then, of course, called Sun Devil Stadium. And what happened then? The Devils upset the Ducks. You saw some incredible performances out of wide receivers like Brandon Ayuk and Frank Darby. It was an awesome scene to be had there at ASU that night. And by the way, the last time before that Oregon came to Tempe in 2017, Sun Devils took down what was then a 24th ranked Oregon team. So can the Devils make it 3 in a row against a nationally ranked Duck team in Tempe? Overall in the series between these two squads, ASU has won 2 of the last 3. Of course, those were those 2 victories in Tempe that I just referred to. But prior to that, the Ducks won 10 straight in the series from 2005 to 2016. I know this was a very competitive series in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Then the Ducks completely on the Devils. ASU bounced back a little bit at home. I think the loss streak in Eugene goes back to like 2004, if I'm not mistaken. So it's kind of like almost the inverse of the streak that ASU has with Washington and Tempe. So this is a team that certainly has had ASU's number as a whole over the last 10 to 15 years. But in Tempe, most recently, the Devils have had some luck.
Yeah, we'll see if some of that home cooking can play a part again. And I mean, I just when I think of like Oregon and Tempe, sure, like the Ayuk 81-yard bomb in 2019 comes, but like really the thing that really kind of sticks is that 2015 game when ASU was in the sharp Tillman uniforms and just like the triple overtime and just like the play call that we can, like, you had both the Mario Richard, Kalen Ballage over 100 yards rushing, but then like we don't need to relitigate that. I mean, we'll move on to the future.
Yeah, that was some frustration to say the least. Now that it's nearly 10 years from now, the wounds still hurt. So the Ducks this year, entering this game, they are at 9-1, and of course, just like they were back in 2019, ranked 6th according to the AP poll, and I believe the College Football Playoff poll, which was released not long before we started recording here today. Their only blemish this year is that close loss at Washington. A matchup that is not yet sealed in, of course, but seems like the odds-on favorite to be that Pac-12 championship game this year. And I think if they were to replay one another and play in a neutral site, I gotta like Oregon's chances. So the Ducks really are in the thick of the college football playoff push. You got to kind of think that they control their own destiny. I mean, if they win out and win the Pac-12 championship game, I think that'll put them in position for at least a top 4 spot. Would you agree with that logic? I know college football is crazy, but I think that gives them a dang good shot, right?
Absolutely, because you're going to have huge wins over Oregon State. It's a highly ranked team as well. Then you beat Washington again, or you get that revenge, and the way some other. I mean, I think this is a team that honestly can maybe make a run. I don't know. Like, I mean, I do think that Georgia's still probably the class, but I don't know. This is a team that has very few holes, and then the holes that they do have aren't, I guess, not even really holes. I mean, they're just, like lesser strengths.
And, on the national scale, you've got Ohio State, Michigan. One of them's going to bump one of the other out. So we'll see how that unfolds. That's not the focus for right now. It's this Oregon team, and this is a dynamic, diverse, and absolutely dominant Oregon offense. Of course, last year's offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham, now at Arizona State. You all know that by now. Will Stein came over and he took that baton and has run sprinting like a 4.2 40 with it, because Oregon is doing some major things with veteran quarterback Bo Nix. He's a guy that should be a finalist and possibly the recipient. You just heard about it for the Heisman Trophy. He's a name that may not be talked about as many as at least a few others, but he is very, very deserving of the potential for that honor. Oregon leads the nation, averaging 46.3 points per game, ranked 2nd in the country in total offense. Not just a one-dimensional team, which we'll talk about as we break down the position groups and things like that. Oregon's tied for 12th nationally in scoring defense. They allow just over 17 points per game. So talking about Bo Nix, he ranks 5th in the nation, averaging 313.5 passing yards per game. 29 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, leads the nation, completing 77.7% of his passes. We know that he can move a little bit on the ground. You just heard a great breakdown on how he's doing that differently this year versus last year, but he still has 121 net rushing yards with 5 scores, so he can scramble out a little bit. He is one of the most rejuvenated college football players that I think you've seen in a long time, between what did and did not happen at Auburn. You get him to Oregon, you get him under Kenny Dillingham, now Will Stein. I mean, this guy has had a tremendous, tremendous ascent in these last 2 years.
He is just absolutely fun to watch. I mean, this is a guy that just simply put, does not make mistakes. There's really no holes right now. And I did see something on Twitter today that was a very apt comparison that like he's a pro quarterback playing college ball because his approach to the game and kind of, as mentioned, refined under that year under Kenny Dillingham, now building upon that in 2023, but just does not make mistakes. I mean, he's right now on pace to break the FBS single season accuracy record, with his completion percentage. Does not throw picks, and the whole offense does not turn the ball over. Just 4 turnovers on the year as a whole, scoring 30 points per game each and every time out. They hung an 80 spot, right, and to open the season.
And then that's the team that scored like 90 something
Yeah.
in the game. So they would beat that other team by like something like 175 points, I guess is the logic there.
Yeah, it is wild. But yeah, Bo Nix, and in terms of just, this is a quarterback that, you mentioned he can run, doesn't necessarily have to given the weapons he has, but just, his full command of this offense is just something really fun to watch. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the rematch against Washington. There's going to be a lot of points in that game.
I mean, he's a guy that previously was dubiously nicknamed Bo Picks just a couple years ago. And now he's just a complete polar opposite. So credit to him, credit to the staffs that he's been working with. And as you go down the list of these skill position players, again, this is not a one-man operation at all. They have just a ton of options that are doing things at massively high levels. You heard about Bucky Irving. He should hit the 1,000-yard mark in this game. He's got 939 yards, 10 touchdowns, also 40 receptions on the year. Pairs very nicely with Jordan James. 570 yards and 9 scores. So just on the ground, particularly, they've got a couple names. And I agree with what we just heard. Bucky Irving is one of should be talked about a lot more than he has been. And he did it last year. This is not a guy just, arriving on the scene this season, but it doesn't really matter if people are talking or not, because he's getting it done on the field and this team is succeeding in a major way. And he's a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah, just probably the best back. I mean, he's going to be a first team all-conference selection at the running back position, and he and James are a dynamic kind of 1-2 punch. Irving can do it all. You mentioned 40 catches. That's pretty damn respectable by running back at this stage. And just James is a guy that was coming in as the number 3 initially, but with Whittington being out of the lineup, he's kind of picked up that slack and really been a very damaging complement. I mean, both of those guys are averaging just about 7, or I think James a little bit over 7 yards per carry. And so that obviously means they have a really good offensive line, as they typically have in recent years. So a really good offensive line that's able to pass protect well, but also open those big holes for those very good dynamic backs and keep Bo Nix upright. It's kind of the best of all worlds.
Yeah, we'll get to some incredible superlatives about that O-line in here in just a moment. They've got one of the absolute best wide receivers in college football in Troy Franklin. He's got 1,093 yards and 11 touchdowns on 60 catches in just these 10 games. He's tied for 5th nationally in receiving yards per game, tied for 3rd in touchdown catches, but he doesn't do it alone. You heard about the raving about this guy, Tez Johnson. He should get to 1,000 yards this season because Oregon's going to play a handful more games after this regular season. He has 725 yards and 8 scores. So, and they have a few others that can do it, but that's a dang good 1-2 punch, about as good as it gets in this conference.
Yeah, you have the big bodied guy in Franklin, the dynamic playmaker. He is just so fun to watch. He's going to be rewriting those Oregon record books as well. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to see exactly how the Brian Ward kind of maneuvers his chess pieces in the secondary. Because again, do you have a guy that can keep up with Tez Johnson in the open field, one of the fastest guys in the country? But then you add in a guy along the seams and tight end Terrence Ferguson. He's a big bodied guy, 6'5", 255 pounds around that range. And I mean, these are some dynamic weapons again to a quarterback that is very smart, does not force the ball, does not make mistakes, happy to take things what the defense gives them. And again, behind a line that is just not going to allow a whole lot of pressure on their quarterback.
Yeah, with all of the success, the tremendous success, the top of the leaderboard of the nation success of this offense has had with those skill players, quarterback like we just mentioned, a number of significance with this offense is the number 4. Oregon has only allowed 4 sacks on the year in 10 games, and this offense has only coughed up the ball with 4 turnovers on the season. If you're doing that in 10 games, only 4 turnovers, only 4 sacks allowed, that's how you get in the position they are, where they're legitimately competing for a national championship. That is just absolutely unheard of when you have all those things clicking at the highest potential rate at the most important possible time. This team is only a few plays away from being an undefeated team, and had they done that, they would be certainly in that top 4 right now. So even though Oregon is, outside that immediate college football playoff landscape in terms of those top 4 teams, that doesn't mean they can't get there by the time the season's done.
Yeah, and I think they will get there because I think they're the most complete team. When you have all the key pieces that they have right now on the offensive side of the ball, and we'll talk about the defense as well. Just there's really no blemishes on this team. There are things that maybe you'd like to see, better performances at, maybe in terms of just like offensively, they can be a little bit penalty prone. Tez Johnson had some issues with some drops, but these are kind of more nitpicky things in terms of just this Oregon machine. And obviously with Dan Lanning there, you think they're going to lead with defense. The defense is very good, but the offense, with continuing what they were able to put out there on the field with Kenny Dillingham and with Will Stein, it's just an absolute machine right now with Bo Nix just operating at an otherworldly level.
Now, moving over to the defense, like we mentioned earlier, this is not a one-dimensional team at all. Oregon is tied for 12th nationally in scoring defense, as it allows just over 17 points per game. They rank 18th nationally in total defense, 10th in the nation against the run, allowing just under 95 net yards per game. They are 49th against the pass, so maybe you might be able to throw the ball a little bit on them, but not particularly easy to do. We heard some high praise for the cornerbacks for Oregon. Some other names to keep in mind as far as defensive personnel: Fresno State transfer safety Evan Williams. A little bit of everything. 62 tackles to lead the team, ranked second on the team with 4.5 sacks. And he also has 2 fumble recoveries at defensive end. Brandon Dorless has a team high 5 sacks and also a team high 6 pass breakups. When you have a defensive lineman that's leading your team in pass breakups, that means that dude is very, very active. So they have a little bit of something at each level of the defense.
Yeah, so like there's really no weaknesses on the defensive side either, because you look at on the run game, they're really good there. I mean, they're 16th in yards or 17th rather in yards per carry allowed. The 24th in opponents' passer rating allowed. They've got a pretty good and very deep secondary as well. I mean, they had their top corners go out injured against USC, and we're still able to hang there. You mentioned Evan Williams. I mean, he's a guy that's really impressed me when I've been watching some of the Oregon games leading up to this one this season. Just all over the place. And in terms of you heard the top 2 corners in Kyrie Jackson and Jalil Florence, really good. So obviously Elijah Badger has been a focal point since Kenny Dillingham assumed the play calling duties, and they force feed him the ball. It's going to be real interesting to kind of see exactly kind of gamesmanship there of Dillingham versus that Oregon defense, and see how they're going to be able to try to exploit some of these matchups. You don't like your chances necessarily being able to run against this very big and ferocious front. Now UCLA's ferocious front last week was more kind of the athletic and speed variety. These guys up front for Oregon are just some big nasty dudes, as Joe alluded to. And overall, this is a defense that likes to bring a lot of pressure from a lot of different levels, a lot of different ways, kind of like similar to Brian Ward in terms of just absolute chaos there. There's a lot of, like DBs will be coming in, a lot of DBs with kind of tackles for loss numbers. So a lot of chaos that they're bringing. They've succeeded in shutting down opposing offenses, but bringing a lot of pressure. They had great success last week against USC as well. So again, it's just another thing, just kind of like the offense, where you might have some imperfections here and there, but you don't have any kind of glaring weaknesses, top to bottom, like pretty much every other team in this conference has.
So the name Evan Williams makes my stomach churn every time I hear it, but absolutely nothing to do with the football player, because it's also like their standard edition is like a bottom shelf whiskey that I used to drink a fair amount in college. Is like a $6 or $7 bottle. That's gone by the wayside in my adulthood. It's gone the way of the Cuervo Golds and the Jägermeisters of the world. Yeah, Evan Williams, some decent times, but yeah, not so much. The football player, much better, much more tasteful. So now that we jump into our keys, I think there's one that we generally agree on for the most part. I think you have to do things that no one's done to them. Significantly easier said than done, but to overcome a team that is as powerful on both sides of the football and rolling like Oregon is, I mean, you got to get sacks, get turnovers. Like we said, they have only had that happen 4 times each all season. You might need to get 4 in each this game to have a chance. You have to create some weird anomalies. If the ASU is going to pull this massive upset off, things need to happen that people look at the box score and say that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, so that was like, I echo that key as well. Just empty the bag of tricks. I mean, just get weird, offensively, defensively. Yeah, so I think that you just have to kind of, unload the chambers there. My second key is, I think specifically, you have to be +3 in turnover margin. And as talked about, they've only given up the ball 4 times all season. So that seems highly improbable, but you need to steal a lot of possessions because I don't like the chances of ASU, and especially their offensive line, given the current state against that Oregon defensive front, to be able to sustain 8, 10, 12, 14 play type of drives that are able to shorten the game and chew off a lot of clock. So I think you're going to have to steal possessions the good old fashioned way with defense. Now, ASU's defense has been pretty good all season long, and they've been very chaotic, but I just don't know if, the BJ Green, Clayton Smith tandem is going to be able to get in the backfield consistently enough to affect things. But I think, you have to find ways to maybe, if you're Brian Ward, to move your chess pieces around and bring that chaos and hopefully force the Ducks into multiple mistakes, critical mistakes.
I'm going to echo something that you mentioned just a moment ago. You got to continue the weird, just ride or die with your weirdness. I mean, it's a late point in the season. It's a game that you're certainly not favored in. It's a chance just to lay it out on the table. Just put everybody that you got out there, leave it on the field. Don't hold anything back. I'm giving you every football cliche that exists in the football book of cliches. But just go do it. Have fun. Go for broke. You're the underdog. You kind of have nothing to lose. Obviously, this game could get away from ASU in a hurry, but you just want to go out there. Just keep that buy-in, keep that fight, that grit that you saw last week. And it may not be enough to overcome Oregon because UCLA with a third-string quarterback is a much, much different offensive beast. I can't even really use that, with accuracy than Oregon. But just go out there and have everybody buy in and put everything on the line and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, my final key is just, hope that the Ducks are overlooking you, because they were coming off a huge game against USC, a lot of national attention there, going up against the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, against perhaps the future Heisman Trophy winner. And then, of course, next week, looking at they don't call it the Civil War anymore, right?
I don't know what they call it, but I don't think they call it that.
Yeah, it's a shame.
The ball game of football in Oregon.
So against Oregon State, it's going to be obviously fraught with implications for the conference race as well, because the Beavers are still very much in things as well. You just hope maybe that they're coming in as 24-point favorites, that they think that they can just kind of show up. I don't think that's going to be the case, because obviously with the ties that Lanning and Dillingham have, I think this is a different kind of Oregon Duck team that's very different in some key ways from the 2019 squad that came down here and left with a loss. But I just, you maybe got to hope that you catch them on a bad day. They didn't bring their A game, and you can exploit that and kind of shorten the game and get some breaks.
Yeah, at the risk of lacking creativity and not having all my own keys, I'm going to echo that. You just want to try to catch them slipping. That USC game was kind of closer than maybe some thought it would be. And I know that USC is completely circling the drain this season, but they're still USC. They're still got the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. That's still an achievement to beat them. And this previously known as Civil War game that's coming up next week, I mean, depending on how the ball bounces over the course of this week's game, there is a scenario where the winner of that game will go to the Pac-12 championship game and the loser will not. Oregon State, even though they, suffered that loss against Arizona not too long ago, they're still in the thick of things, obviously masterfully coached by Jonathan Smith. So you want to hope that Oregon is just looking at this as maybe a walk in the park type of game, or something that they can just kind of, sleepwalk or halfway their way through. I don't anticipate that. We just kind of rattle that off, because these are not necessarily keys in terms of what we think will happen. It's just basically what will need to happen for ASU to have a shot at a victory. I think there's obviously way too much on the line for Oregon, as far as what they can do for the rest of the season. Though I think this kind of thing happened. It was a much, much different team, but then things nosedive for them with like a Utah loss last year. Like they really kind of fell to pieces a little bit at the end of last year. But again, with the storylines with Dan Lanning versus Kenny Dillingham and that friendship and that, professional confrontation that they're going to have for, I think, the first time, maybe the only time, there just are too many reasons to believe that Oregon's going to have a successful day. But if ASU is going to do it, they've got to do some weird things and hope for some other weird things to happen.
Yeah, so look, going to our predictions, I just, I'll keep it kind of brief, because I think that ASU is just not there talent-wise to take on the Ducks. They can get lucky and get weird, and I think that they're going to kind of, as I mentioned, empty all the chambers, get creative. I think it's going to be some fun. There's going to be some wild stuff, perhaps that we haven't even seen before. Kenny Dillingham is a wildly inventive mind, and we will see some of that on display. I'm sure that he's going to want to kind of, impress his former coach or former head coach that he worked for a season ago, and keep him off balance. And there'll be some gamesmanship there. I just think Oregon is too good, too talented, and operating at too high of a level at this point. They see the path to the playoff is right there. I think they're going to be coming to Tempe. They're going to be, and I think they're going to take care of business. I think they're going to jump out to a lead. I don't think that necessarily Lanning's going to, maybe lay it on too thick, but I do think ASU is going to fight. We've seen that. And I think it's going to be a very impressive fight. Just, clearly personnel wise, ASU is just not there in a year zero situation under Dillingham, especially given all the injuries, to be able to keep up. I think Oregon emerges 38-14.
Very, very similar viewpoint that I have. A tremendous amount of talent on both sides of the ball. This is a team that's playing with a lot of momentum. It's a team that, as things have worked out, that one loss to Washington is not catastrophic to their season. They still hold the keys to get in the college football playoff, and you do that, obviously anything can happen, and that would be a huge, huge feather in the cap. I guess no pun intended if we're talking about the ducks and feathers for Oregon to exit the Pac-12 with a college football playoff appearance, maybe even a national championship, or at least an appearance in the national championship game. It's just going to be difficult for ASU. This is not the same scenario as last week, to where you're playing an offense that hasn't really been doing much and is down some key personnel, to where ASU's defense was able to buy opportunities and maybe shorter fields or get some huge stops to help the Sun Devil offense. It's just going to be very, very difficult for ASU's defense to limit Oregon enough for that component to make a significant difference here. And ASU is just not going to go toe-to-toe offensively with Oregon. No one does. They lead the nation in scoring. They're the top offense in the country. I mean, we've seen some very, very talented offenses that ASU has played, such as USC, such as Washington. This one might be better than both of those. So, again, going to be a very challenging matchup. I know that Kenny Dillingham is going to give it his absolute all, because he'll do that no matter what, but especially with this matchup. But I just think that the talent and the health disparity going to be a big issue there. I have a similar type of score as Brad. I'm saying Oregon leaves Sun Devil Stadium, Mountain America Stadium, with a 35-17 win over ASU.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our illustrious panel of guests: James Crepea of the Oregonian, Cade Briggs, Jalin Conyers, and the legend himself, Jordan Simone. This game will kick off from Mountain America Stadium at 2 p.m. If you're not there, the TV will be on Fox. Make sure you stay with us on the social media side of things. A lot of good things coming down the pike, especially things are ramping up into the what's going to be a very active offseason. You can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and give me a follow on social media at bdenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy 42. A huge thank you to all of our sponsors, which of course includes Sun Devil Family Charities, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization created primarily for the purpose of raising funds to provide financial assistance to Arizona State University alumni, students, staff, and immediate family members adversely affected by medical issues. Monetary donations are always appreciated and support those in need due to any unexpected medical conditions. And Sun Devil Family Charities also has volunteer and sponsorship opportunities that you can learn about on their website. To learn more about Sun Devil Family Charities and other ways you can support them, check them out online at sundevilfamily.org, and be sure to give them a follow on Instagram at sundevilfam and on Twitter at sundevil_family.
Once you're done supporting these amazing sponsors, drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. That would be very much appreciated. And Joe and I will be back next week to wrap it up with our Territorial Cup preview.